My name is Darcy McCallum. I'm one of the elders at Renewed Church. We're very pleased to be able to host this event today. Really excited you got up so early on a Saturday morning. Woo! Did you all stay up and watch Alex Ovechkin score his 894th goal? We watched. I got three experiences that are riveted in my mind about the GTA. The first one was in 1998 when I came and I was exploring, do we want to move here and, do church planting? And I've got this memory of riding on the subway, going to the Hockey Hall of Fame, of course, right? And the diversity in the subway just absolutely blew my mind. And it was like God just grabbed my heart and said, you got to move here. Of course, then I had to go home and convince Vicky that we needed to move here. But that was my first memory. We settled in southwest Mississauga, and in our neighborhood, there was a little plaza, and in that plaza, there was a mosque or a masjid. And every Friday, there was people clad in cultural, traditional clothes walking down the street, and you knew that people had moved into the neighborhood because they could be within walking distance of the masjid. And on Fridays, the parking lot of the plaza would be just completely jammed. Every other day of the week, there'd be like 3 or 4 cars in the plaza. It's now been torn down for, stacked townhomes. But, I mean, they were just flooded with people on Friday afternoons. A few months ago, actually, I guess it was a couple years ago, I was driving to a friend's place up in Brampton, and I made a mistake. I didn't pay attention to the multiple faiths on my calendar, and it happened to be a holy day for a particular group, and they had a temple on the street I was going by, and I got stuck in a traffic jam. But it wasn't the traffic jam that got me. It was the literal hundreds of people, hundreds, not dozens, hundreds of people walking from every nook and cranny, every street towards this temple. And it struck me just how diverse our country is. One of my favorite writers is a guy by the name of Leslie Newbigin. He served for 30 years as a missionary in India. When he got back to the UK, he started to note that the church wasn't really ready to engage people of other faiths. And one of the most significant books for me was his book called The Gospel in a Pluralist Society. And yet I find that over the years, churches kept focusing on postmodernism and engaging people with Christian memory. And yet another scholar, a guy by the name of Reg Bibby here in Canada, has studied, and he said, the fact is that most Canadians don't have a church background and they don't have a Christian memory. Now, you know this, right? Your kids go to school and they got friends from all kinds of different faiths and communities. You work in workplaces with people with all kinds of different faith commitments. I do. And the question is, how do you get beyond just friendly conversations and help people understand who Jesus really is? And chances are they've got a notion of what we believe, but it may not, probably isn't accurate to what our faith actually says. And for years, it seems like people are talking about what do we have in common, but we're not able to get beyond that friendly little discussion to be able to get down to the grassroots and say, well, what's the differences between our faiths? And what do we do with that? So I was so encouraged last week, and I'll have to say it was just last Saturday. Bartley introduced me to Greg Armstrong, our speaker for today and next week. And I was just so inspired by Greg's approach. And I know Greg's developed it with his colleague Alex here, and I'll let you do all that introduction stuff. But what you're going to encounter today and next week is what I think is a very respectful but very vigorous engagement with Islam. Now, make no mistake about it, this is not a simple little process. You're not going to get 3 easy steps to convince someone to believe in Jesus. Doesn't work that way. We have to enter into conversations very prayerfully, very respectfully, and then equipped with resources and tools that Greg's going to share with us. Some of you may want to dig deeper, and we'll be really excited to support that. For others, it'll be a chance to really get a better sense of the scope of what we need to be doing in order to follow Jesus' mandate to bring the gospel and to make disciples of all nations. I'll say one more thing. I was struck, I've been thinking about John chapter 4 a fair bit over the last couple of weeks. And in John 4, Jesus voices one of those famous sayings that I've heard at missionary conferences all over the world. You know, lift your eyes and look, the fields are white for harvest. Now, he's saying this because there's a whole group of people coming from the city in Samaria out to talk to him. And we often forget, well, why were they coming to talk to him? Well, they were coming to talk to him because just a little while earlier, Jesus had had quite a theological engagement with a woman at a well. A woman who was very well versed in her beliefs and her understandings of the Bible as from a Samaritan point of view. And as she engaged Jesus, she discovered, oh my goodness, this man is the Messiah. And she went back into town as a credible witness. All these guys and came out and followed her back to see and engage with Jesus. The tools that we're getting today are going to give you a chance to have those, if you will, woman at the well moments, where you're able to actually dig deep and help people encounter the reality of who Jesus is and decide for themselves. And my hunch, my hope, and I don't know, Greg, what you think about this, but my hope is that people become then that gateway to reaching others, and we see the fields ripe for harvest. Anyways, Greg, let me pray for us as we head into this, and then I'll let you come and just take over, and I'll go sit down and put on my learning hat. Father, thank you so much for today, for the chance to reflect on people that you love, people that we know and love, who follow a different faith. Lord, I pray that you would just guide Greg today, guide all of us, open our eyes and our hearts. Help us to realize, Lord, that it's not just about having good, solid arguments, but it's about having a love and the Spirit, your Spirit working and us walking in step with you to help, if you will, unveil the eyes, take the veil away from the eyes so that people can see so clearly the truth of King Jesus, our crucified and risen Lord. Thank you that we have this opportunity to learn. Help us, Lord, to engage and really absorb today. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Greg.
Thank you to Renew Church for hosting this opportunity to share with you what I have learned along the way for reaching Muslims, and just so happy to be with you. This is a two-part thing, just to kind of give some context what we're going to be doing. So this is the first of two sessions next Saturday, same time. Hope to see you back. You're not going to take it all in one session or even two, okay? So what I really want, just to make it clear, setting out expectations, we are not expecting you to learn everything that you're going to hear, and then now you're going to take it and you're going to be fully ready to engage tomorrow, right? Yeah, so, or even the next Sunday, okay, the day after the second session. What this is, and even as Darcy was getting at, this is an invitation for you to dig into the material. We're introducing it to you, okay? You do have to do studying, but we're not expecting you to go and become an Islamic scholar. We just expect you to really learn and dig down on the points that we're going to share. Because what we're going to share is a full step-by-step approach, a strategy, not just simply separate points, okay? So just to also say this, I don't know, let's say, how familiar, maybe by raise of hands, okay? How many of you have already tried to engage in a religious conversation with Muslims and share a biblical faith? Okay, great. So that's most of you. That's really good. So sometimes people have not at all, okay? Let me maybe do show of hands for this too. How many found it difficult? I think that was everybody who raised their hand before. Okay, so that is what I would hope would be the reaction, not because I want it to be difficult, but because it is difficult. And if somebody doesn't raise their hand the second time, it's probably a sign that you probably didn't think it was difficult when really actually you weren't getting through to them. Okay, so what Christians always find talking to Muslims is they cannot really get anywhere with them. Okay, so what we're going to be sharing today, what I'm going to be sharing, and also my friend Alex, who's up here at the front too, he actually really established the foundations of this methodology. Okay, so I'm glad that he could join us as well. But you don't have to talk; you can just sit and enjoy. Okay, not that, but do feel free to interject at any point that you'd like. Okay, this is I like to say this is my approach as well. It's not just his. He established it. I've come along a few years ago after I met him and learned it myself. It took me time to really own something that wasn't my own at first, but then also enhance it quite a bit. And now this is where a lot of my time often is spent is developing it further. But essentially now I can say it's my own. Okay, so what I would love for you guys to say is this is your approach too. Okay, this is it's not like copyright any of us. We just want this information to get out there because what we're going to share we believe is really a game changer for getting through to Muslims, not just having a conversation, but actually breaking through. Okay, so that's what we're only concerned with is getting actually through to a Muslim so that they can hear the gospel with clarity and be receptive to it. Now, whether they are going to respond saying yes is up to them. Okay? But we want to break down all the barriers in the way, and there is a lot that's there. Okay? And everybody, let me say, every different religion, anybody we're talking to, different background, everybody, in terms of their worldview or religion, they need a different approach based on their religious background. Okay, so an agnostic or an atheist is different. Okay, they don't necessarily have an authority that they're following. But if you're talking to a Jehovah's Witness, you have the Watchtower Society. If you're talking to a Roman Catholic, you have the Magisterium of the Catholic Church. If you're talking to a Muslim, it's the Qur'an and the Sunnah. If you're talking to a Sikh, it's the Guru Granth Sahib, right? So we're talking about different things for different people, and it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all for all different groups. But we're going to say it is sort of a one-size-fits-all for this group, okay? And that's what I want to emphasize. You don't need to learn about every different sect of Islam and have a different kind of approach for reaching Shia and Sunni and Ismaili and Ahmadiyya and so on. This is geared toward all Muslims, okay? So the essence of our approach, really, this is a title I would use, especially if I'm sharing kind of a short form in my slideshow on a Sunday morning to a church, introducing the essence of the message of our approach, which is really what I want you to understand is that Old Testament stories can save Muslims. Okay? Old Testament stories, that is the focus of what we're going to be talking about, can save Muslims. This is a completely different way of approaching Muslims than you're going to find anywhere else. So let me just anchor us with Scripture. Jesus says in Matthew 5:17-18, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not an iota, not a dot will pass from the law until all is accomplished." So is the essence of the message we're done with the Old Testament? No. Jesus came to reaffirm and stand upon it, to establish his ministry based on it, and teach it, which is what he goes on to do in the rest of the Sermon on the Mount. Okay, 2 Timothy 3:16 and 17. For all Scripture, Paul says, all Scripture is breathed out by God and profitable for teaching, for reproof, for correction, and for training in righteousness, that the man of God may be complete, equipped for every good work. Now, it's interesting, in the context, when Paul was speaking, does he have all the New Testament? No. What is his Bible? The Old Testament. Okay, now the New Testament books were being written, but they were also being circulated. It wasn't like a collection that you'd have. So mainly what he's thinking about is the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, or the Tanakh. If you don't know some of the words I'm going to throw out, hopefully you'll learn them along the way. Tanakh is the way that religious Jews refer to what we call the Old Testament, but they don't call it the Old Testament, or we call it the Hebrew Bible, Old Testament, Tanakh. Torah, we're going to use that word a lot, which is particularly the first 5 books, the Pentateuch of the Old Testament or Hebrew Bible. Okay, so Jesus is affirming all of that and standing upon it. Now, I want to introduce you a little bit to the ministry that I'm involved in. I'm a church planner and a pastor. Actually, in Mississauga, we're a house church called Saturate Church. But one of in terms of outreach ministry, I'm also really serve as a missionary locally, and engage different religious communities. But in particular, our focus for now has been engaging with the Muslim community. So I don't want you to walk away and think, oh, Greg only talks to Muslims. I talk to everybody, okay? But we have actually a defined strategy to reach Muslims. We don't have a defined strategy to reach Catholics or New Agers and so on. Now, I'll talk to all of them. I have lots of arguments, but I don't have a strategy. Okay, strategy is a step-by-step approach that's based on refining what is the best way to get through to them. Okay, we've got that for Muslims. We don't have that for the others. Okay, so since people don't know this strategy, we need to get it out there, and this is the focus of my outreach ministry. Okay, so this is speaking on an Ahmadiyya mosque in Brampton. The bottom pictures are on their satellite network. And the top is at McMaster University. This is a local masjid. Masjid is the Arabic term for what Westerners call a mosque. Okay, a mosque is not what Muslims typically call where they gather. They call it a masjid. Okay, a mosque is like we anglicized it and created a word. Okay, but they gather at the masjid. Okay, this is the local masjid near me. We're sitting for iftar, which is breaking the fast on Ramadan, etc. And you can see there's a lot of people in that picture. I just screenshotted a live stream of when they were gathering. That I think it was the same day actually after I left. They all poured in, and it's a small place, but they can gather. I think it's 500 people max, and they have to rotate because they have 4,000 people in their community that would gather, and they come in as sardines. And notice, do you see any women? Imagine gathering that many men for church. And they're going to rotate. There's a lot of them. Okay, so this is street ministry. This is something that I started engaging in with last year, adopting Alex's approach. Alex started street ministry. You can see him here. This was us at Muslim Fest, right? Which is an annual festival and Celebration Square in Mississauga. We'll be back there again this year. If you want to join us, please let me know. And this is how we do it. We have a little table on wheels. You have to have it on wheels, and with a big sign that says "Free Christian Literature." Everybody knows we're Christians. We're not hiding who we are. Okay, we don't want them to think anything else. Actually, we have a thing that we do when we talk to Muslims, usually, when we say hi. Okay, so they're going to say Assalamu alaikum, and we're going to say hi. Okay, because we want them to know we're not Muslims. Because you may not know this, but actually, it's not just an Arab thing. For Muslims, you are required, according to the Hadith, according to the Sunnah, the way of the Prophet, the example of Muhammad, that you must greet others and especially respond when you're greeted with salam. You must respond with salam or peace. So if we do not respond with that, now it's not that we extend peace to them, but we want them to know right up front, we're not a Muslim. Okay, so we try to wear that on our sleeve. It's not offensive, but now they know. It's kind of like when you go into a foreign environment. Almost probably everyone has experienced this, where they speak a different language, and you just learned a little bit of the language just to like say hi, and you start, and then they start talking to you in that language, and you're like, sorry, I don't know actually really. So we're just avoiding that awkwardness. We're just say, I'm going to speak in English. Okay, so we know they know we don't belong. It's like, okay, so they don't get confused, and okay. That's the idea. Okay, and this is what I really love to do. I like the street stuff as well. Just getting to get used to that. What I like about it is we just stand behind the table and we wait for people to come. We don't stop people. We don't hand out tracts. We wait. We give out the books if they want to take it. Okay, like they take it. We don't give it to people. And it's just Bibles and books that Alex developed, the Quran Bible comparison, and Muhammad was right is another title, which is a kind of a cheeky title, and you'll learn more what that means. Okay, and you are welcome to them. We are going to be updating those books also. Okay, we're working on that. But yeah, this is what I really like to do, which is sit down with them and spend a few hours with them, going through the material slowly and where they can digest it. Whereas on the street, you got to go really quick and very abbreviated. So starting with today, you're going to be introduced to the material, and probably I'll be giving you things that you're not always going to have the time to use every point. And I'm going to skip over a lot in your handout too, because just for the sake of our time, we are always fighting time. Okay? On the street especially, now they stop and they talk to you. You're not interrupting them, so you have more than 2 minutes. Okay, you might have half an hour, or even an hour, especially Muslims. Muslims love to talk to you and love to talk about religion. That's what I love that about them. But the problem is, if you don't know what we're going to share, you're going to have a very frustrating experience. Okay, so we don't want that. We want you to feel comfortable to talk to them, to share with them this information, and so that you'll actually be ready to, you just can't wait till you have a conversation with a Muslim. Okay, no more intimidation. Okay, so those are group settings, so on. Now I want you to, if you already know this, don't say what it is, okay? But I want you to guess what that is. This is my my phone wallpaper. A prayer meeting?
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you, can you describe that more? What you're seeing?
No.
Okay. Usually people think it's houses or something, okay? But these are people with their prayer mats. This is an aerial shot on 9th Line. Okay, so I live in that neighborhood. I'm in Churchill Meadows. Okay, so this is on 9th Line at the community center outside. Okay, this is Eid al-Adha. What's it? Oh yeah. This is my prayer mat that I was given as a gift at when Alex and I were at Reviving Islamic Spirit conference, which is an annual conference right on Christmas weekend, pretty much. When we're doing Christmas stuff, they have free time, and now they can finally do their events right on our holidays. So for me, as kind of a missionary, someone with a missional heart, I'm going to be very busy as a pastor with Christmas. Plus, I got to go to these things because I need to talk to them, right? It's opportunity. So this is my neighborhood. This is if you're in that region, that's your neighborhood, okay? There were about 20,000 that gathered that day for Eid al-Adha outside. Now, that was a special gathering, a special speaker that drew lots of people. But they're regular basically 4,000 members in that local community of regular people that go to their mosque, the masjid. And in fact, they can't fit it in their building, which is on Ridgeway. This is at the community center. They rent out rooms at the community center all the time also. So just to say, and as Darcy was getting at too, with his experience, we have a lot that are here. In fact, we are the minority. Oh, I should have done that for our region, but I did this for another church in Scarborough I spoke at recently, and I showed them the blue dot was the church I was speaking at, and the left picture was churches. And if you looked closely, most of them are Catholic churches, so I'm going to say they don't count. Okay, and then the right side is masjids, mosques. And if you compare, it's like the same. And frankly, a lot of the churches got to reach anyway. So this is the normal picture in different local regions. I usually do that. I'll look up where we are to show people where the masjids are. Of course, there are lots in Mississauga. There's a handful that are under construction that are being built as well. Okay, have you heard of the Great Commission? I think everybody who's here has, I'm going to assume it. Okay, but I want you to look at the stats here. Barna said, for churchgoers, they were asked, have you heard of the Great Commission? 51% said no. 25% said yes, but I can't really recall its exact meaning. Like, I guess they've heard of the term, but they don't know what it is. 17% is what we wanted them to say. Okay, yes, and this is what it is. Okay, and 6% are not sure. Great. This is like a very exciting picture for the church, right? Okay, so the state of the Great Commission, according to the Lausanne Commission, I want you to see this graph, okay, from their recent study. This gives you a picture of the unreached people groups in the world collectively by religion other than Christianity. Okay, so of course, a lot in the Christian umbrella also need to be reached too. But these are other religions, as Darcy was saying about Leslie Newbegin and so on. We need to be able to reach other backgrounds that have no familiarity with Christianity and so on. Okay, well, the biggest group is Muslims. Okay, the next is kind of neck and neck. Hindus and agnostic, or sort of non-religious. Okay, and they're kind of neck and neck. Probably the agnostics will outpace the Hindus if they aren't already. And then the rest is smaller groups. So this is what I'm going to say to you guys. If all Christians knew how to reach the top three, they knew how to talk to Muslims and agnostics, atheists, and they knew how to talk to Hindus, the world would be transformed. But the problem is most Christians don't know how to talk to anybody. Okay? And the agnostics, that's the only ones you're going to really learn about here in the West. And that's what Darcy was getting at. That's the group that if you're going to learn traditional apologetics and stuff, it's evidence for God's existence. You got to learn all that stuff too. Okay? But this stuff we're going to talk about today is for Muslims. Okay? And also, I noted in their commission, this is from their report, if you look at the top quote on the bottom part of it, it says that while adherents to global religions like Islam and Buddhism remain most resistant to Christianity, nominal believers, I want you to hear that, nominal, so they're not serious. They don't really know what they're cultural. Nominal believers in either religion are most likely to convert. Conversions by committed Muslims, Hindus, and Buddhists are less common. In fact, very rare. I know of maybe one, there's very few stories. In fact, when Christians hear testimonies of ex-Muslims, I want you to go in with suspicion. Okay, when you hear those stories, they are usually exaggerated. Okay, they present themselves as having been like, I was raised as a Muslim. Well, they never really went to masjid. They never did the five daily prayers, or were you really a Muslim? I mean, come on. Your parents were atheists, but they were cultural Muslims. This is what I often see. And so this is like somebody saying, the Muslims saying all these Christians that are converting to Islam. Well, there are, but are they serious Christians? Or are they probably nominal? They're nominal. Okay? It's very rare that somebody would be serious from either background is going to convert to the other. And that's a problem because I'm concerned about reaching the real Muslims, okay? This is what we're talking about today. We're not talking about the cultural, nominal. You might be able to reach them with other things, okay? But even them, this is what you should use. This is better than anything else you're going to use because we want them to know Islam should not even be an option in their mind. Okay? Even if they're nominal, they're not really serious. Let's just get it out of their system. Okay? Never to look back and think, I never really looked at Islam. You know, I talked to my Christian neighbor and he shared the gospel with me and I accepted it, but I didn't really read the Quran. Maybe I should read it and take it seriously. No, they should read it, but once they're introduced to what we're going to share, they're not going to take it seriously. Okay, so let me give you the basic principles, the general principles of what we look at in our approach. She shouldn't have thrown that down. Let me just say, you've got a handout. Okay, so this handout is going to be more detailed than my PowerPoint. So if the first page, you'll see our general principles. Okay? They should be the same or about the same. I think I wrote it in a different way in here. But you can follow along. Feel free to take notes. I can send you things digitally as well. We are recording this session and the next one as well. So if you feel like you just want to listen, feel free to do that. Okay? So let me try to quickly go through a general principle so we can get into the meat of our material. First, we are respectful and steel man the other side. Meaning, okay, it should go without saying, right? Like, be respectful. But if anybody is on social media and they see anything about Muslims and Christians engaging each other, typically there is a lack of respect, okay? There's a lot of hostility from the Christians, okay? Yes, from the Muslims, but from the Christians too. And this is a big problem. So often, it's been so often said by Christians, how do they say it, Alex? They say, everybody is different. You got to reach them by their culture. And Muslims value passion and almost like anger. Like you got to be almost hostile in the way that you talk to them. This is false, okay? Stop listening to Christians who think they know what they're talking about. The reason why they think they know what they're talking about and they think that you need to be like agitated and now passion is fine. Okay, I'm fine with passion. But it doesn't ever need to get heated. Okay? You don't need to raise your voice. The reason why I think Christians are doing it is because they don't have anything that's good. So it just gets really frustrating. Like, how could then their approach? We share nothing about moral issues. We do not talk about ethical issues. We don't talk about historical skepticism. Not like, was there a Muhammad? Of course there was a Muhammad, okay? So I want you to get anything you may have been introduced to Islam about out of your system and put it aside. And this approach is not to be mixed with anything else, okay? So if you bring in anything else, you're going to taint this. You're going to ruin it. Okay, this approach is meant to be extremely focused, and that actually helps us to remain respectful and calm and gentle. In fact, by the end of it, Alex and I often say, like, we're giving them so much stuff that we're overloading them, and they have no idea how to answer it, right? That they're like a little baby. Like, we got to be very gentle with them. That we don't want to be very nice to them, okay? Because the way the conversation goes is very different with what we present to them than any other approach. Otherwise, they are in control of the conversation. We want to be in control of the conversation, not them, okay? And we're going to control it with facts that are not offensive. We never want to be offensive, okay? And this goes very counterintuitive to what a lot of Christians are doing online. Okay, so what I want you to get it into your head is put that aside. Anything else you've heard. David Wood, Sam Shamoon, Jay Smith, Hatun Tosh, all their stuff, okay, is completely incompatible with what we're going to talk about. Okay, so be respectful and steel man the other side. This goes with it. Steel man, not straw man. Straw man is when you're misrepresenting the other side with a weak form of it. You know what I want to do? I want to build Islam up and make it as strong as possible, then refute it. Okay? Because if I, it's like reverse. No double standards, okay? Reverse it. If somebody comes to you and they misrepresent what the Bible says, and they say lots of things that's like it's so obvious that that's not what it's saying. You're misrepresenting it, reading it uncharitably, and so on. And then they're mischaracterizing the Bible and Christianity by those things, and they're attacking those things. And you're going to say you're going to wish that they would like actually engage with what it really is. This is exactly how Muslims feel when Christians use anything else with them. Okay, because we typically are attacking with other approaches. We're critiquing something that they don't believe. Okay, they believe a much better thing than what you're critiquing when you're using other things. So if you're gonna critique extremist jihadism, the vast majority of Muslims don't believe that. You're going to say, well, they should believe that because this is what their sources teaches. Well, okay, are you accurately understanding the sources in the way that they approach it through the school of thought that they follow? You may think that you are. How much of Islam have you studied? Okay, Islam is very complicated, especially when you're dealing with those kinds of issues. The stuff that we're going to look at is not very complicated, and that's what makes it actually useful, okay? And also, even if you were right, you got to convince them that you're right. So the big hurdle is convincing them, persuading them. That's the real problem. Persuading them of almost anything is so difficult. So we want to remain respectful. We want to steelman the other side. Make the best form of it. As James White has said, I want it, and he would say this is a general principle for any other religion or worldview we're going to critique, is we want to critique the best that the other side has to offer. Okay, not the worst, the best, because you know what they're going to do? They're going to, if you critique the worst, let's say they believe the worst, you critique that, what are they going to do? They're going to go get a better form of it. They're not going to leave it. They're going to get answers to it that they didn't know, right? So the question is, what will they not be able to get answers to? That's what drives us, okay? Second thing, we read the Qur'an and their own sources. Main thing I want to say about this is I pay attention to what Muslims say, not what Christians say about Islam. Okay, so Christians do this about almost any religion, actually. And this is difficult because it's like, you can't be a scholar about other things. But look, really, wouldn't you want, if somebody's going to explore Christianity and try to understand it, wouldn't you want them to talk to both read the Bible themselves and try to understand it on its own terms, and talk to knowledgeable Christians when they have questions or they think there's an apparent contradiction and stuff, and not just Google it and go to skeptical websites? Okay? Let's do the same thing. Talk to knowledgeable, not your neighbor who may not know much, okay? Maybe your neighbor does, but a lot of Muslims know a lot. The average Muslim knows quite a bit. Compared to the average Christian about Christianity, the average Muslim knows way more about Islam than the Christians know about Christianity, unfortunately. 3, we aim to persuade by reasoning scripturally. So I already talked about persuading, and we reason scripturally. So we're drawing our points primarily from the scriptures. We are not appealing to things outside of it. We're not trying to argue philosophically, logically, like appealing to some abstract idea that's independent of the Bible and the Quran. Okay? You may be able to do that with other systems, but not with Islam. Islam is a text-based religion, as is Christianity. So to refute Christianity, hypothetically, what do you got to do? Refute the Bible. Okay? You can't just appeal to something philosophically, really. Okay? 4, we aim to persuade Muslims, not persuade Christians. I'm just going to be a bit blunt. I don't really care what you think. Okay? I care what they think. To reach them, if I impressed you with lots of things in the room and then I went and I use it on Muslims and that doesn't make any headway, what is the point? Okay? I'm going to say that is essentially what you will learn with other things. this is the problem, is the stuff that Christians have been learning from other Christians isn't actually persuasive to Muslims. So, I don't want to just be pragmatic, but I'm going to evaluate what am I going to use, what's useful. It's got to be true, it's got to be logically valid, but it's also got to be actually practically persuasive. So that's going to be a subset of what's true and valid is also what's persuasive. If it's true and valid but not persuasive, I don't want to use it. So let's say 99% of the 100 points that I could make, arguments I could use, are practically not persuasive to Muslims. I will throw out the 99%. 5. Before we share the gospel, hear this. We want to share the gospel. There are people who have met Alex and myself along the way, and they have this impression like we're not trying to share the gospel because we refuse to share the gospel until the very end. Okay? The gospel is the very, very last thing we want to share with we want to get there, but we want to get there. We can't start there. If you start there, you have basically ruined your opportunity with the Muslim. And that's not your fault. It's the way that Islam was designed. Okay? They would love for you to talk about Jesus and him dying on the cross and the Trinity and the New Testament. Anything New Testament, please, the Muslim will want you to talk about it because they will just assault everything that you will bring to them. And that, I'm sure, was your experience if you talk to anybody that's a Muslim. So we won't do that. Well, that's why, like I said, Old Testament. We will not talk about the New Testament or Jesus or the Trinity or the cross with a Muslim until we've dismantled the Qur'an and relaid Old Testament foundations. Those 2 stages must be done before, and in that order, before we will get to the gospel. Okay, so that's the main big picture you have to get in your head. Never share the gospel with a Muslim before you have relayed the Old Testament foundations. And never do that until you've dismantled the Quran. Okay, so the main thing that we need to do is dismantle the Quran. Okay, what is the Quran and what is Islam? Where does it come from? Well, this is our thesis, okay, and I firmly believe it now is true. Okay, and I don't have time to elaborate all into it right now. I have lots of evidences and I could show it to you, but I'll just give you a little bit of explanation. Number 6 here. So we have identified Islam as a heretical offshoot from rabbinical Judaism. Okay. Rabbinical Judaism. Now, this is you know what the big problem is? Christians don't know what Judaism is. Christians have this idea that Judaism refers to the religion of the Jews who believe in the Old Testament minus Jesus. Okay, that's their summary. That is not what Judaism is. Judaism does, I'm going to say it, put it a little bit more controversially. Judaism does not follow the Old Testament. Okay? They claim to believe in the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, the Torah, is everything to them, except it's not practically because they follow the oral Torah, not the written Torah primarily. They believe in 2 Torahs, that at Mount Sinai, Moses was given 2 Torahs, the written Torah, that's your Pentateuch, and the oral Torah. What is the oral Torah that God gave to Moses on Mount Sinai? All of the rabbinical teachings and practices and rules that will ever be taught in history were given to Moses and passed down orally. So when the rabbis teach from their traditions, God revealed that to Moses and it was passed down. Really? Do you know why Jesus had a big issue with the Pharisees? Because of the oral Torah. Okay? The Pharisees, rabbinic, I don't like calling it Judaism. It's because Judaism is misleading. It is rabbinical Judaism. And that's not a slur or anything. This is what religious scholars, Jewish scholars, will also describe Judaism as rabbinical Judaism, because different forms of Judaism at different time periods and so on. But rabbinical Judaism is the Judaism of the rabbis. The rabbis are the Pharisees. Okay, so you need to grasp rabbinical Judaism is Pharisaical Judaism. Okay, now you all know from the gospel accounts, the Pharisees emphasize lots of extra rules and so on that are not in the Torah or the Tanakh. Okay, and Jesus took issue with them, Matthew 15 and so on. Okay, so they were following all these other, that's where it's coming from. The Sadducees didn't follow that. They rejected the oral Torah. They were the priests, but they also rejected certain Orthodox doctrine like angels and resurrection and so on. So we don't follow them either. We follow we could call Messianic Judaism. Christianity is Messianic Judaism. Okay, it's the Judaism that follows the Messiah, who is the fulfillment of the Hebrew Scriptures. We are following Old Testament Judaism. Okay, fulfilled in the Messiah. Okay, accepting also the New Covenant Scriptures that come with him. So the New Covenant Scriptures, the New Testament Scriptures, are the fulfillment and continuation of the Old Testament. That is what really is in line with the Torah. I'm going to say the rabbinical Jews, which is the Pharisees, that sect of Judaism from the first century is the only other sect other than Christianity or Messianic Judaism that survived the first century. Okay, so modern we call Judaism. We mean the religion of Judaism other than Christianity or Messianic Judaism. That's Pharisaism. Okay, rabbinical Judaism, the Judaism of the rabbis. So what are we saying? Islam is a heretical offshoot of rabbinical Judaism. It is not, as many Christians have said, and Western Islamic scholars who are not Muslims, critical scholars, many of them say Islam started out of a heretical offshoot of Christianity. Because why? The Qur'an mentions Jesus. Okay? Well, that is not the focus in the Qur'an. And this is perfectly, what the Qur'an says about Jesus is perfectly compatible with an offshoot of rabbinical Judaism. Because Jesus is not the Son of God. He's not God. Don't say the Jews had him killed on the cross, the Quran says. Okay, it was made to appear that way, which, by the way, that verse can be interpreted differently. Not just that he wasn't crucified. It could mean that he was crucified, but don't say that the Jews did it. Okay, that's another way of understanding it, I think is actually correct. The focus of the Quran is not Jesus. Most of the Quran is about, do you know who the biggest, the most mentioned Old Testament, biblical figure is in the Quran?
Like Moses?
Moses. Do you know who the second one is? No, Muhammad's only mentioned 4 times by name. Abraham. Do you know who the third is?
Oh,
Ishmael.
Joseph or Jacob?
Good guesses, but Noah. Okay? And Jesus is somewhere after that. The top 3 in order are Moses, then Abraham, then Noah. Now, if you take the top 2, a scripture that is obsessively talking about Moses and Abraham, what does it sound like? Judaism. Third is Noah. Why would Noah be so high? Because the Arab followers of Muhammad are primarily Gentile, not Jewish. In rabbinical Judaism, they teach about a concept called the Noahide laws. Okay, these are 7 commandments that God gave to Noah for all of humanity. Now, of course, there's not 7 commandments, right? In Genesis 9. Because the rabbis just make stuff up and they add it in. They don't put it in the Bible, but they put it in the oral Torah. The oral Torah is now written in many forms in the Talmuds and the Mishnah and the Midrashic literature and so on. Okay, lots and sea of literature, of the rabbinic literature. Okay, that is all oral Torah. And so the 7 commandments of the Noahide laws, okay, exactly look like Islam. Because Islam is a Gentile religion. It's not a ethnically Jewish religion. It is a universal religion that is supposed to be the religion ultimately. Who would be the first prophet in Islam? Do you guys know? They like, who would they consider their first prophet?
Oh,
Adam.
Who said Adam? There you go. You got it. Okay. Adam is the first prophet. Is Adam a prophet? Well, the Jews say he is. The rabbis say he is. So does the Qur'an. Is Noah a prophet? Biblically? The rabbis say he is. The Qur'an says he is. Okay, interesting. They share the same people as prophets that are not regarded as prophets in the Torah. Who's following the Torah? Okay, not the rabbis. Neither is Muhammad and the Quran. The Quran and Muhammad are following the rabbis, who are not really following the Torah. That's what I want you to grasp. Okay? So in our approach, we need to understand what Islam is. It is not a heretical offshoot of Christianity, a form of Nestorianism or something, okay? The focus of Islam, that Islamic teaching, Islamic theology, in fact, teaches almost exactly the same things on so many issues as rabbinical Judaism. You know, there's no theophanies, the God coming in physical forms and appearing in rabbinical Judaism. Okay, like, you know, the Old Testament, does God ever appear in any form? Okay, but the Jews don't believe that. Are they following the Old Testament? How could you not believe that? Well, because they're following the oral Torah, which reframes all those stories. Okay? Which retells stories and adds backstories to all the stories in the Bible, the Hebrew Bible. And by that, it reinterprets everything and reframes it all. Yeah.
sorry, that kind of went over my head. So,
Yep.
God coming down in form, like God as fire, or the cloud.
Yep. The pillar, fire, and cloud, or God walking in the garden, or God coming as one of the three men that visited Abraham in Genesis 18.
They don't believe any of that? They don't believe that happened? Or
They don't believe that God literally did any of that. Okay? They have a different way of reading all of that. But it's like certain examples, you're going to say, well, then you really cannot take it a different way. Right? Like he appears as a man, as one of the three in Genesis 18, very specifically. Okay? Or he comes in an angelic form in the burning bush. Or, you know, it says in Exodus 34 that Yahweh came and stood on Mount Sinai. Also, 1 Samuel 3, when he's calling to Samuel at night when he's young, it says that the word stood calling to him. Okay? So, I mean, you can't take that really a different way. It is physically present in some form, and certain forms is human form also. So the rabbis don't allow for theophanies because their theology doesn't allow that God, who is other and majestic, would come into a finite form into the created order. Who else does that sound like? Muslims. Okay, it's the same theology. Original sin. That we are corrupted as a result of Adam's sin. And now you have an inclination to sin as a result of it. Okay, did you know the rabbinical Jews don't believe that? And neither does Islam. Islam teaches that there is no fallen condition of humanity. You are born not only pure, it's called the doctrine of fitra, but you're not inclined to sin. There's no inclination, okay? The problem is culture and environment, okay, why people don't follow. Or blood atonement. You know that religious Jews today, they're not really vying for a temple, and they really need, because they need to build it and sacrifice, right? For Christians, Christians are typically confused about this. They think religious Jews, like, they need blood sacrifices because the Bible says it, right? Okay, but they're not in some urgency trying to think like, I guess we're not right with God. We need to be doing blood sacrifices. No, because rabbinical Judaism says you don't need blood sacrifices. Okay? All you need to do is sincerely repent. That's the main thing. Okay? And strive to obey his laws. You're not going to do it perfectly. You don't need to. Because God will be merciful. Because God is so merciful, you can trust in his mercy as long as you just sincerely try to follow him, and God will accept you without payment. What does that sound like? Islam. That's Judaism and Islam. It's all the same. Okay? So we're going to come and we're going to present the gospel. God came down incarnate. Okay? And he died on your behalf to deal with the effects of original sin and your personal sin so that he can make payment as a substitution on your behalf because you know blood needs to be shed. Okay? The whole gospel is impossible to share because the foundations are distorted. And they're distorted first in rabbinical Judaism, and they are inherited in the Qur'an because it comes from that origin. So are you going to talk about the gospel and Jesus first? When you're going to talk to a religious Jew, you're going to start with the New Testament? Where are you going to start? Old Testament. Although we're going to develop a strategy for them next related to this. Well, first, we got to dismantle the oral Torah. Okay, then we're going to use the Old Testament to dismantle it. Okay, but we got to deal with their sources and continue to use the Hebrew Bible to relay the foundations after we dismantle the oral Torah, and then we can go to the gospel, right? That's the logical way of dealing with it. So that's the way we're going to approach Islam. We got to dismantle the Quran first, which is essentially their oral Torah, okay, so to speak. Then we're going to keep using the Torah, which we are going to use as the way to dismantle the Quran. We're going to keep using it to relay and clarify the true foundations. Original sin, blood atonement, theophanies. We're going to share about the suffering servant in Isaiah 53. Then we're going to finally go to the gospel. Okay? But once we've done that, the gospel is easy at that point. Yeah, you want to ask a question, Darcy?
I want to make sure we're not thinking that we should be telling Muslims that the Quran is an offshoot of rabbinical Judaism. It's good for us to know, but if you bring that up to a Muslim, that's going to shoot your conversation.
Well, we will, but we're going to get there. Yeah, not at the beginning.
Certainly wouldn't make that a casual conversation point.
Well, okay, but once you go through what we go, because
You got to go through what you're.
yes, yeah, because at the end they're going to be like, okay, so then what are you saying the Quran is? Okay, I'll tell you.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I'm just saying,
Yeah, not at the beginning.
Through this process, you can't have that
Yes,
conversation.
right.
I just want to make sure we're.
Yeah, absolutely. But this is for us to understand where we're going, okay? Because we've got lots of points and things that you got to learn to dismantle, okay? But you need to know how we're orienting ourselves, where we're going, and everything, okay? Where are we? Number 7, we focus only on what the Quran says about the Torah, not New Testament or Christian theology. Do I need to explain it more? I don't think so. Number 8, we focus only on comparing parallel narratives in the Quran and in the Old Testament or Torah. We only talk about, key thing, we only talk about narratives, and we only talk about with what is parallel. If it's, okay, my Quran and my Hebrew Bible, okay? So if it's in the Quran and it's in the Hebrew Bible, meaning that it's the same story is in both, that's what we can talk about, nothing else. So now we can set them side by side and look at it and compare. Okay? Anything else that's not parallel, we can't really talk about because how are we going to establish it? Okay? Bible says that. Well, who cares? Quran also says it. Oh, okay. So this is the stuff we can talk about. And the next point, related, number 9, we focus on details, not doctrine. I want to let that phrase sink into your head. Details, not doctrine. Okay? We do not talk about theology with Muslims until we've dismantled the Quran. Because where do you get your theology from? Bible? Okay? Old and New Testament? Where do they get theirs from? Quran and their sources? So you're going to debate, let's say, theophany. Can God become a man? This is the question that many Christians pose. It's not the right question, because how are you going to answer that? Well, no, he can't, Qur'an says. Oh, no, but how can you say it limits God? Qur'an says. Okay? That's the stopper. It doesn't matter what you say. God already spoke. Or did he? That's the question, right? Did he speak in the Quran or did he not? That's what we have to come back to. Same thing with the Bible. Did he speak through the Bible or not? Question is, which book is from God, right? Because we debate about doctrine and theology or ethics or philosophical things. That we're like, ultimately what we believe and how we live our lives is derived from divine authority, what God has revealed. Okay, that's what we both believe as Muslims and Christians. We're just following different books. So if we're going to debate about the teachings of the books without debating the book, how are we going to get anywhere? We're just going to argue back and forth and make no progress either way, actually. So the root issue is which book is from God. And that actually, if anybody's had real experience with talking to any Muslim, you know that's what it comes back to. The Bible was corrupted. Thank you. Okay. So we don't talk about doctrine or theology. I want you to get that in your head. We derive that from our text. They derive it from theirs. So anything we're just deriving, we can make no headway without dealing with the text first. Okay? And I should say this too. What do Muslims always say about the Quran? It is perfectly preserved. I'll just say amen. Okay? I love that. So what this is very counterintuitive for Christians, especially if you learn any other apologetics. What do Christians focus on all the wrong things? They want to critique, there's textual variants for the Quran. Of course there's textual variants. Do they amount to much of anything? No. Like almost nothing. Okay? We got bigger issues in textual criticism and for the biblical manuscripts than the Quranic ones. Okay, do I think we can? Of course, we can reconstruct it. We got good manuscripts and so on, but let's not use double standards, right? Now, Christians are going to say, well, but the Muslims say there's no variance. Okay, well, fine. Imagine you convince them there's variance. Are they going to leave Islam? No. What are they going to say? Oh, like you guys. Doesn't affect doctrine or anything, right? And just because a physical copy over there has a slight difference in a word or whatever, doesn't change anything. We know what it is, right? I don't want to just move them up a notch. I want them to leave Islam, right? So imagine wasting all of your time trying to argue about something that's only going to move them up a notch and like refine their theology. Okay, I don't want to be an internal... Let's debate which theology within Islam. Okay, let's just cut it out from its foundations, right? So I like to say it's amazing, and actually I think it's been really well preserved. Okay, fine. I'm going to say I don't think it's I think there's textual variance, but none of it really matters. This is what I'll say: that none of it really matters. It doesn't amount to much of anything. Okay, so I think it's been so well preserved. Yeah, absolutely. Because what's amazing is because it's been so well preserved, we know what the contents are. And it's the contents that are the problem, not the manuscripts. Okay? If the manuscripts were not reliable, then I might be unsure what was originally in the Quran. Now I got a problem. Okay? I got a better situation when I know what's actually there was given originally. Now I can critique it. Okay? So I say, I won't say it to them usually like this, but, unless maybe they're being difficult with me or something, which is usually not the case. Okay. But to Christians, I'll say the Quran is a perfectly preserved corrupt book. Because the corrupt aspect is the contents. It's not the text. Okay. Okay. So big picture. First, we deconstruct Islam's real 5 pillars. Second, we reconstruct 5 biblical pillars. 4 of those are the Old Testament foundations, and the last pillar of all is the gospel. Okay? So the 5 pillars of Islam, You should all know what those are anyway, but we're not going to talk about those 5 pillars. We're going to talk about the real 5 pillars. What are the real 5 pillars? Where they're the issues that we're going to address. We're going to say these are the things that at the root, this is what really defines Islam and that need to be addressed for us to break through, okay? So we're going to take 5, essentially, we're going to say statements that represent what they believe, every Muslim, okay? Doesn't matter their sect. And then we're going to dismantle each pillar. So the essence of our approach, we called it the master key. The idea is we're like unlocking any door so we can break through to any Muslim. And we're going to address the foundational aspect of our approach. The master key is the 5 pillars, where we dismantle them when we relay 5. Okay? So deconstruction, then reconstruction. Now, I want you to understand, we're going to go through the 5, but there are many, many, many other points we can add on. Okay? In fact, you will never learn it all. There's so much to look at because it's all rooted in the narrative comparisons, the stories that we compare. There's so much to compare. Okay? So I'm doing more in-depth research on all of that and developing resources if you want to go further. We know where we would add on if we're going to add on. Essentially, I don't have this in my PowerPoint today, but Alex often uses an analogy of if you're going to shoot a rocket from the ground into space or a satellite into space, what is a lot of the mass of the rocket got to be? Fuel. Why do you need a lot of fuel? You got to fight gravity. Okay? So the influence of the Quran and Islam on a Muslim is like the gravity. You need a lot of fuel to resist the pull of the Quran and Islam to get out of the grip of gravity, out of the atmosphere to then be free. Okay? Well, essentially, what we are doing is in the dismantling or deconstruction process, that is the fuel, the arguments and points we're making is the fuel to resist the pull of Islam on the Muslim, and eventually to get out of the atmosphere is when we are then relaying the 5 real pillars for the Bible. Okay? And then we have no resistance. Okay? We want to get to a point where there's no resistance. And it's amazing when you get to that point. Because imagine talking to a Muslim and they actually don't resist. It's very unusual comparatively. So what are the real 5 pillars? These are the statements we're going to deconstruct. First, the Bible. Now, because we are going to focus on which part of the Bible? Old Testament or Torah? Okay? Okay? They're going to say the Bible's corrupted. Well, Torah is corrupted, because that's what we're going to talk about. Okay? Now, Bible, I should say this. Muslims, when they use the word Bible, we don't use the word Bible with a Muslim. Because for a Muslim, they think that Bible means New Testament, or more accurately, the Christian scriptures. They don't even know what the New Testament is. They don't know what they're talking about, okay? So, but you use Bible, that signals for them the Christian books that are not Old Testament, because they don't think that Christians believe the Old Testament. By the way, this is also the Christians' fault. How many Christians really believe the Old Testament and are following it and know it and will defend it? What do Christians always do? They only talk about the New Testament with anybody. We need to get past that, okay? Old Testament is the key. So the Torah was corrupted, they claim. Secondly, they claim God authored both the Quran and the Torah. So both of these are from God, is the claim. 3, Abraham and Ishmael traveled to Mecca and built the Kaaba. Now, this is the one you probably didn't even know. Okay? And this is actually the most important one. And because Christians don't know it, they don't know what they're to focus on. This is the most distinctive thing out of all the pillars, this one. This is the most important one. I should emphasize this. I found an experience when I teach other Christians this approach, they keep getting stuck on the first pillar. All they want to talk about is establishing the Torah. We're going to do that, but this is going to say kind of the least important is the first pillar. The most important is the third pillar. Okay, so you need to get in your head, we need to get to the stories, we need to get past the first point where we're going to establish the Torah. But every point we have so many things to say, okay? We just don't have all the time in the world with them. Okay, so what's the significance of 3? What direction do Muslims face to pray? What are they facing toward? Mecca, the Kaaba in Mecca. What is the Kaaba? It is that cube-shaped thing. Maybe I'll try here. Okay, so this is a prayer mat that was given to me by a Muslim when Alex and I were at that convention, and we went to a dawah table. Dawah is like the word for evangelism in Islam. It means to call to Islam, dawah. Okay, so we were at a dawah table, and they're giving us stuff, and the guy's like, he gave me a kufi, one of the hats. That's kind of like a kippah a bit, which is kind of funny, a little bit. All right. But also the prayer mat, okay, what's on it? Tells you the direction. You got to face the Kaaba. The Kaaba is pictured there on it. Okay. He said, I said, look, I'm not a Muslim. He said, no, take it. I believe. Like you'll use it one day. Okay. You know what? And I actually like that because he really wants me to believe. He cares about me. You have to look at them with grace, okay? They are very passionate and zealous and often devout and disciplined and put most Christians to shame, okay? But unfortunately, they're following the wrong thing, and that's really sad, okay? So we got to look at them with a different way than some Christians are doing. So the point about the Kaaba is the most important point because what is the Kaaba, let's say theologically for Muslims? It's the first temple. Okay? This is the best way to put it. The first temple. Before the first temple, built by Solomon, was the real first temple, built by Abraham and Ishmael in Mecca. God established the first way how to worship him rightly by Abraham and Ishmael with the Kaaba. But that means that defines everything about religion. That's where everything is focused. You know, for Christians, we kind of think, when we think of the Old Testament, there's a lot of things that are required that you probably would think, oh, I don't really like, I wouldn't want to have to do that. I don't really like that. You know, guess what? God doesn't really care what you like, right? That's exactly their attitude. And they're right to think that way. The problem is God didn't institute that, right? So they say, well, the 5 prayers, which is actually really not, the best way to think of the 5 prayers is not actually prayers, it's worship. Because it's a prescribed way to worship. You got to do these actions, you got to say these things. And for all the evangelicals like myself, all think, oh, well, it's so ritual and so impersonal. But did God say it? Did God establish it? If he did, it doesn't really matter what you think. Okay? So for when evangelicals make these points with Muslims, it actually sounds really selfish and arrogant that you would say that you know better than God. So the question is, how can we break through to show them they didn't build the Kaaba? Because if it wasn't built by Abraham and Ishmael, God didn't establish it. It was built by pagans. Number 4, Ishmael, this is the thing that unfortunately, so many Christians believe this. Ishmael was the father of the Arabs. Come on, he was not. Not according to the Torah. And we'll show you that. Okay, Ishmael was not the father of the Arabs. They claim he is the father of the Arabs, specifically that he's the father of the Arabs in the Hijaz, which is the region where Mecca is, and specifically the tribes that were in Mecca that Muhammad descended from. So the key issue for them for number 4 is that Muhammad is an Ishmaelite. He needs to be an Ishmaelite to be a descendant of Abraham, because he's not a descendant of Isaac and Jacob. This is according to them, like I know historically, but according to them too, they would say this. He's not from Isaac and Jacob, so he's got to be from Ishmael. If he's not from either, he's not a prophet, because the Quran says that prophethood was given to Abraham and his descendants. So he won't qualify for prophethood if he's not an Ishmaelite. Number 5, Muhammad received his revelation pattern after the same way as Moses received his revelation. Meaning, not just Moses, but Moses in particular, but in general, Muhammad follows in the pattern of the previous prophets. He received revelation like them. His ministry of prophethood was just like them. He looks just like them. And that's why we know he's a prophet, because his life followed the same pattern as theirs in their ministry. They were rejected by the leaders of their people, persecuted, often migrated, and then ultimately were vindicated. And in particular, Moses and the way that he received his revelation. Okay, and that's that. At that point, they don't really know is a pillar, but is a pillar. Okay, that's the last one. So we're going to keep it there. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and we're going to come back. And thank you guys for your attention. We're dealing with the 5 pillars. The first pillar was the Torah was corrupted. Bible in general, Torah specifically. Okay. So how would we approach deconstructing it? Now, my notes are going to be a little bit, I think, more sparse than what you have. Okay. I'm going to try to keep in mind what you have in your handout. Okay. So this is the first pillar. What we're going to be doing with this, we're going to be sharing with them verses from the Quran that talk about the Torah, and we're going to show them contrary to what they have been taught about the Quran. They've been taught that the Quran teaches that the Torah was textually corrupted. Okay? It does not teach that. In fact, it teaches the opposite. So this is a very nice thing that we can start with to help, as I was reorienting you, we got to reorient their headspace around it, okay? So that they are now, we want to get them to be more open to hearing what does the Torah have to say, because the Quran tells them they should be open to that, okay? And again, Torah, not Injil or gospel. Injil is the Arabic term for gospel in the Quran. We're not going to talk about that, just the Torah. So we're going to first, I want to explain what we're doing here for you guys to know where we're going, but we don't explain this to Muslims, okay? So what we're going to use is verses from the Quran that establish the Torah specifically in the time of Muhammad. And Muhammad lived between 570 and 632 AD. So the early 7th century AD, this is the timing, that the Quran talks about the Torah. Well, the Quran was revealed, according to them, in the time of Muhammad. So that's early 7th century. So if the Quran is affirming the Torah in its own time, in the time that the Quran was being given, that's in the time of Muhammad, in the 7th century. Okay? So we're not going to talk about the Bible or the Torah today. We're not saying the Quran affirms the Torah today. It doesn't. It affirms the Torah in the 7th century. So it's very important as we're communicating this to Muslims. We're not saying the Quran tells you go to the Bible today. Well, first misstep was you said Bible. Okay, you didn't say Torah. Second misstep is it doesn't talk about today. It talks about the 7th century. Okay, so we have to make sure, I should emphasize this, to establish a hearing with Muslims and to not get on rabbit trails and be distracted, and for them to not lose respect for you, you can't make one mistake. Okay? This is hard. You make one mistake about what you said about the Quran, you've discredited yourself. Okay? Don't misrepresent it. Every point we make, we double check, we triple check, we quadruple check. We got to make sure I'm accurately representing it. I'm not overstating it. Okay? So this is very carefully developed. And when you do this, if you learn this approach and you do it well, their respect for you will be very high. Okay? They're not going to see you as David Wood, who they hate, or Sam Shamoon, who they don't regard as, because I don't respect him, okay? Because he misrepresents what they believe a lot and what the Quran says. And straw mans a lot. We don't straw man, we steel man. We just have to accurately understand it. And all we're after with this point is to show that verses in the Quran affirm the Torah when? You tell me. Thank you, okay? I got to get it drilled in your head. Okay, we're not talking about today. We're talking about the 7th century. Because what do we have before the 7th century for the Old Testament in terms of manuscripts? Well, yeah, but that's not the Torah. But the Dead Sea Scrolls in general, which includes the Isaiah scroll. Okay, so the Dead Sea Scrolls date from about in the 3rd century BC, about 200 to 250 BC to 70 AD. Okay? Most of them also are dated before the time of Jesus. And those are all very important facts you need to communicate to them and you need to comprehend. Okay? We're going to introduce the Dead Sea Scrolls to them at the end of this point. But first, we're going to talk about what does the Quran say about the Torah in the time of Muhammad in the 7th century. And all we're doing is dealing with is what the Quran claims. We're not critiquing it. Okay, we're not doing it. We're just establishing what does it say accurately so that they can see it's affirming the Torah in that time. And then we're going to ask them, have you heard of the Dead Sea Scrolls? Okay, we're not going to do it in the reverse order. Why are we not going to do it in the reverse order? Because if I tell them we have manuscripts before the time of Muhammad, and it's pretty much exactly what we have now. Do you know what the Quran says about the Torah? Do you think they're going to be resistant? Okay, yeah, they're going to be resistant because then now they're going to know. Okay, well, this is where he's going. You know, sometimes, and like Alex often emphasizes, and I'm more in agreement with him about it now, is we don't want to waste too much time on the first pillar. We want to get into the stories because that's actually where the meat is. But yeah, so anyway, the point is we're going to use the verses to establish it. We don't want to spend too much time there. We just want to get them to be more open to hear it. Then we're going to introduce the manuscripts. We don't want them to be resistant to hearing what the Quran says, because what the Quran says is very good about the Torah. Okay? I don't need to misrepresent it. I just need to accurately exegete it, draw out the meaning, interpretation. Okay? So how do I go about this with a Muslim? So, this is the formal beginning to our approach. Okay? So here's a Hebrew Old Testament. By the way, for Christians, it's good if you can get certain books, because we say show and tell. Okay, is very effective. It is. You don't have to have it. You can just use your phone or off the top of your head if you really know it. Okay, but really your phone, you need to show them text. But it is better if it's physical. Okay, because you're not making it up. You didn't just go to a website. Okay, for them, sources and authenticity is huge. So this is a formal printed edition. Okay. Here's a Hebrew Bible, Old Testament. Do you believe that the Hebrew Old Testament was changed? First question. They're going to say yes. Some they actually don't say that. Some of them say no, they don't think it was changed. Surprisingly, Because what are they used to talking to Christians about? Thank you. Injil or New Testament. What are they going to say to that? Definitely. Why? Because it has theology in it. Even though they haven't read it, they know there's doctrine in it that contradicts the Quran. So if they agree with it, that it's reliable, guess what happens to the Quran? It's done. Okay? But the Torah, what would be in the Torah that would be contradictory to the Quran? From Muslim, they're not going to think what it might be. And it's our job, we're going to show them. Okay? But they don't have an initial aversion to it. So do you believe it's been changed? They might say, oh no, I think the text is reliable. What people say about it is not. That's essentially what the Quran teaches, actually. Okay? It's the interpretation, not the textual corruption of the scriptures. That teaches the teaching about it. The distortion is in the teaching and the interpretation, not the text. Okay, so do you believe it was changed? It doesn't matter how they respond, because guess what? After we start showing them all the differences, even if they started off saying, yeah, no, I think the text is reliable. We show them lots of differences. What are they going to then say? Must have been corrupted. Okay, so they're going to have to come back, steel man. Okay, they're going to have to say it's corrupted. Then we're going to ask, okay, so when do you believe it was changed? Before Muhammad or after Muhammad? And for some of them, they have quick answers. Some of them really don't know what to say because they haven't thought about it. Okay, because the Quran doesn't clearly teach about it, and Muslims usually are not taught specific things about the corruption. They just think the Bible was changed. When? Who knows? In what ways? Who cares? Okay, because we got the last book, the Quran. It's like it's the upgrade. It's the next iPhone. Okay, they got the most updated iPhone. That's the analogy they actually like to use. We got the most recent iPhone. Sorry? Windows 95 and what? And when today's Windows, whatever it is. Mine is probably out of date. Okay? So, like, why would I go back to the old version? Okay, it's no point. So for them, they think, okay, well, it's probably been changed. Doesn't matter what it is. I don't need it anymore. Anyway, we got the most recent one. Okay, that's the way they think. So they don't know anything specific. What I want you to get in your head is we want to show them the specifics. Okay? They're not allowed to talk about general corruption of the scriptures anymore, or the Torah. It's not in an abstract general concept. All the differences that we're going to show them, then they're going to have to defend as those are specific instances of things that were changed. And as we show them that, we're going to be building, it's important to understand, we're building a cumulative case. It's not 1 point or 2 points. We want to overwhelm them with differences so that then they see, actually, this doesn't make sense anymore. Okay, why would the Jews change those specific things? Okay, that's what we're going to drive at. So they don't know what's been changed. They don't know when it's been changed. It must have been changed. Okay, fine. All right. We're not arguing about any of that now. We're just saying, do you think it was changed? Yes. Do you think it was changed before Muhammad or after Muhammad? Before, after, I don't know. It doesn't matter what their answer is. The next question, this is very quick. Do you believe it was changed? When, before, after? Okay. Can I share some verses from the Quran about the Torah with you? Okay, and they're going to say, of course. We're going to talk about the Quran. See, we're starting with their book. Now, in your handout, on page 4, actually, I'm going to, on page 4 to 12 is all on the first pillar. Okay, we're not going to go through all that material. I only have a few verses I'm going to show you in the slideshow. But what I want you to understand, it's not very clear, actually. So if you highlight or if you're going to mark it up, maybe you can do this, just so you know what I would emphasize. Some of them I have like a gray highlight on them, but it's very hard to see. It didn't really come through in the printer very well. You can see under number 9, the 2 of them that are gray highlight. Okay. But the other ones that should be highlighted, that's not so clear, under point number 1, prophecies of Muhammad, the first reference, Surah 7, verse 157. So if in case you don't know, Surah is the Arabic term for chapter in the Quran. The Quran is made of 114 surahs or chapters. The Arabic term for verse that they also use is ayah. Ayah is verse, or ayat is plural for verses. Okay, so Surah 7, ayah 157, that should be highlighted. The also under number 7, Torah scholars testified. The first two should be highlighted, Surah 26 and Surah 46. Then also under number 9, reliable law code, Surah 5, verse ayah 43, and Sahih Muslim 1700. Sahih Muslim refers to a Hadith collection. So in Islam, they follow basically two main authorities. One is the Quran. Second is the Sunnah. Okay, the Sunnah, which is essentially the way of the Prophet of Muhammad, his teachings, and his example. You don't have that in the Quran, because the Quran, as I need to emphasize this too, to make sure Christians are not misunderstanding, according to Islamic teaching, the Quran is not written by Muhammad. The Quran was revealed through Muhammad, not written by him, and does not involve any of his thought process. So for Christians, you understand biblical inspiration or biblical divine authorship of the Bible in a very different way than they think of the divine authorship of the Quran. We believe that the Holy Spirit moved through the human authors to produce the product of the Scriptures, which are inspired, which means that God used the human thought processes and literary genres and so on to communicate his message. That is not what they believe about the Quran. The Quran is dictated, word for word. No human thought. The human via vessel of Muhammad, he's just hearing it and he's repeating it word for word. Say this word, then that word, then that word, then that word. Okay? So it's very different. So if you were to say, oh, Muhammad said this in the Quran. No. Okay, you've already you made a big boo-boo. Okay? Once you say that the Quran is authored by Muhammad, now if a Muslim were to say that, they're no longer a Muslim. Because for something to come from the human mind means it does not come from God. Okay, in Islamic theology, there's a mutually exclusive. Just like there can be no theophany, because God cannot come down, those are mutually exclusive. Same way God cannot speak through human thoughts. It's his words. Don't taint it with human stuff. Okay, that's how they think. So the Sahih Muslim reference is a Hadith collection. A Hadith is a narration of what Muhammad said or did. These are oral narrations of records of things that he said and did that were passed on orally by his followers called the Sahaba, the companions of Muhammad. These are kind of like the apostles, his disciples, and they passed it on multiple generations, and they eventually got written down collected in collections, like Sahih Muslim is one collection out of many. Okay? So we don't need to learn many hadith. These are vast collections. You don't need to be an expert in it. You need to know, well, really, you only really need to know 2. Okay? But this one is a third. Okay? That's nice to know. So Sahih Muslim there should be highlighted. Under number 10, under extra support for the unbreakable chain, you should highlight the first 3 ones that are starred. Surah 2:87, Surah 5:19, and Surah 19:12. Actually, also the next one, 66:12. On the next page, the first 3, well, no, not the first 3. The first reference there, 1094, under the stories of the prophets, 1094, 12:111, 12:1-3. I also highlighted where it says the study Quran. Okay, those are kind of the highlighted ones are the ones kind of ideally I would personally try to put on the table with them. Okay, you see, there's lots of references there. You're never going to go through all that. I never go through all that. But it's for you to learn and understand how does the Quran support the Torah in lots of different ways. There's lots of references. This is not like a couple things you took out of context. Yeah, the first one under number 2. Thank you. Confirmation fulfillment on page 4, Surah 2, verses 40 to 44. Yeah. Yeah, okay, so those are kind of like, those would include the ones I'm going to use, and maybe if I have the time, I use those too. Yeah.
Actually, I have a general question.
Yeah.
How Muslim believe in God? Believing He's a spirit?
God does not have a spirit in Islam.
So how is relationship with God?
You pray to Him, you do your worship of the 5 prayers. They have a personal relationship with God. Like, that's Islamic teaching. Contrary to what every Christian apologist will tell you, any Muslim you talk to has a personal relationship with Allah.
Okay, so they have a personal relationship with Allah,
Mm-hmm.
and then they pray and they answer prayer the same like Christians we do, the same like we do. So then I was thinking, when you point out all this, like somebody will tell me the Bible here has a mistake, there has a mistake. But I have a personal relationship that when I read it, God revealed different time, different things. So
Right.
when we talk about this, how does it affect it? To me, if somebody tell me, okay, you see, Jewish or like by Torah already became Old Testament. We have a new one, and we think new one, we emphasize on Jesus. And they said, oh, then they have Torah. Torah is after the new one. They said God continues review to read.
Sorry, what was the third thing you said? The what? The Torah is the Old
No,
Testament.
not Torah, the Qur'an.
Quran. Yeah.
Qur'an. It's after it's God's new revelation.
Mm-hmm.
So you tell me that the Torah is 10 days. For example, somebody told me, oh, your Old Testament is missing 5 books or 6 books from the Dead Sea
Sure.
Scroll or
Okay.
whatever. I couldn't care because I have a personal relationship with God. He answered my
So I think you and I would maybe disagree, because I would care. I don't care about feelings, really, to be honest. I only care about facts and truth. So I meet lots of Buddhists who have a lot of nice personal, religious, spiritual experiences, and Sikhs and Muslims and so on. Mormons, they have their personal testimony of their relationship with the Mormon Jesus, which is a different Jesus. Okay? That doesn't make it true.
So
Right.
our Old Testament is our old things is missing books from the Dead Sea Scroll. So how do you? They said, okay, your things is missing books. So how you said, oh no, I couldn't believe in
The
this.
Dead Sea Scrolls doesn't talk about the canon, so that's not like it's a misunderstanding from the start.
But the Dead Sea Scroll has more books than our own.
Yeah, it has many writings, but it doesn't just have biblical writings. So the Qumran community didn't regard all their writings as scripture.
But there's some scriptures that were missing. So does that affect?
No, you have to establish that point.
Okay, that for example.
That's a misunderstanding.
If it's not misunderstanding, if some scholars tell you they're missing 2 books or 3 books
Which books?
about in the Old Testament,
Which books?
I just for example a case like they prove and you said, oh yes, that's true. Would that like disqualify your faith in God, in Jesus?
Depends. Right? So my faith in Jesus is not based on just my feelings. It shouldn't be. So the question is whether Jesus was who he claimed to be. And we're going to get to, like, maybe we'll come back to your question later. Okay. But I really want to emphasize we are talking about factual issues with Muslims. We are not appealing to personal experiences. I'm not going to talk about my testimony My testimony is completely irrelevant to talking to Muslims. So how I think God worked in my life, well, they can talk about how they think God works in their life. Actually, there's a lot of conversion stories to Islam, okay, including from Christian backgrounds that I've seen, where they'll talk about, they'll give this, I remember this a little bit of, these two young guys like in their 20s, and they're talking, they're giving their account of, they're saying this, they're just recently saying the Shahada, which is giving their formal profession of faith and formally entering into Islam. And then they tell their testimonies in front of the masjid, the mosque, right? And they tell about, like, it's amazing the circumstances, how God orchestrated everything in both of our lives. And this happened and that happened. Like, there's no way to explain it. It sounds exactly like every Christian testimony I've heard. Okay? And I hear from Mormons and I hear from other people. Testimonies are completely irrelevant for talking to people who have other religious experiences. If you want to, all I would say is testimony helps them to get to know you. Okay? That's all it is. But it's not useful for actually breaking through and showing them that what they're believing is false objectively and establishing the truth of the Bible. Right? So if we want to talk about more later, we can talk about it more later. But just to say, our approach is not based on those other things. We want to, and Muslims really respect this too. They don't want to talk about subjective things. They want to talk about facts. They care about facts and logic. Any Muslim you talk to is like that. Okay? And I so respect them for that. So, all right. So let's come back. So the first pillar, what verses are we going to use? So I just pointing out in the handout, we can use lots of different verses. Actually, I'm going to encourage you to use your phones because I'm assuming you guys didn't bring your Qur'ans today. Okay? In the future, if I was training you, I will expect you to bring your Qur'an. Okay? So this is actually, I expect you to bring your Bibles too. I assume a lot of you are going to use that digitally. So to make sure you can follow along also, not just in your handouts don't have the verses printed. Okay, so you need to be able to engage on your phone. So go to Quran.com, Quran. Let's see if I can, oh, I got it here. Perfect. So you can see on the screen, Quran.com. I'm going to teach you how to set things up on your phone. If you have, I don't know for the Androids if it works the same, but for iPhone users, when you go to the website in Safari or whatever web browser you're going to use, if you go to share it on the bottom of your phone, it's like a little kind of like square with an arrow pointing up. You're going to share it. And then on there, when you see the options for sharing, just like scroll down more, and you're going to see add to home screen. Okay?
So there's no like app or anything for it?
There is, but this is a better way to do it. Okay? Also, you're going to learn you can do this with any website. You can turn it into an app. Okay? Instead of bookmarking it in Safari or your web browser, now you can get it right on your home screen like an app. So you can click on it, go right to it. We care about what's practical, okay? So I want to make sure you know how to use it. Okay, and I expect you guys to follow along doing this. Okay, so Quran.com, you add it to your own. If you can't figure out the home screen, just bookmark it and... Okay, so if it doesn't work for Android, just bookmark it and try to figure it out later. If you look on the top right of the screen, you're going to see the little thing for settings. Okay, I'm going to click on that. Well, hopefully it does it. Okay, so the gear for settings. Okay, everyone sees settings. Now you can, in here, you can then select different settings. So I'm just going to tell you the settings I would use. If when you see the section word by word, just click on transliteration as well. Okay, I'm going to do inline for the display. And then at the very bottom of the settings, you're going to see selected translations. And the one that should appear is Dr. Mustafa Khattab, the Clear Quran. So click on that. Now you're going to see under English many different translation options. So you can just select all of them if you want. Just you don't need to do the transliteration. Definitely Hilali Khan, Sahih International. I mean, all of them is good to have, really. Maybe I'll just, maybe just for the sake of looking at it, we're going to do those four. Sahih International. Mustafa Khattab is the Clear Quran. And now I'm going to say at this point, before I forget, if you do not have a physical copy of the Quran, I encourage you to get a copy. And I encourage you to get specifically the translation called the Clear Quran by Mustafa Khattab. I have only 5 Qurans here today. Please take them if you don't have one. I unfortunately have run out of my Clear Qurans. I have sometimes I get kind of Muslims to supply me with them, and I give them away to people that I train. Okay, and the Clear Quran is the best one. But you take the Sahih International if you like. I just take it. I don't really want them, so you can have them. They're on the table over there. And yeah, so the reason I say the Clear Quran is because the Clear Quran has nice headings throughout the text in the translation, and no other Quran has headings. Okay, so Quran is very hard to read because it is kind of a jumbled things together, and it's very hard to follow. So the headings actually help orient you as you're reading it, and it has nice footnotes in it too. So I highly encourage you to do that. So coming back to here, so once you have selected those settings, go back here, and then X off your settings, and then I'm going to show you how you're going to find something. Typically, I think it's easier rather than typing into the search. Scroll down, and it's going to list all the surahs. There's 114. They have a number and a name. So we're going to use the first one as an... Actually, let's use one that's mentioned in your handout as the first one, but not on my PowerPoint. So Surah 7, Al-Raf. Okay, you're going to click on that. Then what you're going to do, and on your phone you're not going to see it usually, you're going to look at the top and you're going to look for this thing with the little tiny arrow pointing down. Now how you get that is you start scrolling down on the page and that's going to start showing it. Okay? And then you're going to click on the little arrow and it's going to pull over this side panel that will list the surah and Surah 7. No, it's not showing a verse. Verse should show you the verses as well. And then you can click on here and type in the verse 157. You're going to give it a second to load. Now we got it. Okay, so now what you're going to see on my screen is it's going to show you the Arabic. Okay, and you can click on it. And it will pronounce it for you if you want. And it shows under it the transliteration. That's the English rendering of the Arabic. So you can see how it read it. You can see the literal word for word translation. That's the under there. That's the interlinear. And then under this is one verse, okay? Under that, you're going to see I selected 4 translations. It's going to show you the 4 under it. Okay? And then from there, you can go on to the next verse. Okay? So this site is very nice. Actually, I'll show you one other feature. Very nice. You're going to see a little book symbol. Okay, might be at the top or side of the verse. The little book symbol. You click on that, and it gives you 3 different tafsir. Tafsir is the Arabic term for commentary. Okay. And the first one there is Ibn Kathir, abridged. That is the most kind of the most popular commentary and it's old. It's like 14th century, okay? And so he gives comments on that verse. All right? And you can go and you can select Ma'arif al-Quran. That's another one, and so on. So just so you know how to work the website a little bit. And you can, in the search setting on the website, you can also search a term, like nice term you might want to search is Torah. Okay? There's a whole backstory to that for Alex's story. When he first searched it, and he's like, oh, wow, okay. So, and then you can see all the uses of that word. So let's X out of there, and let's look at the verse. Okay, so since you guys are all following along, someone read out loud, and you'll see the clear Quran or Mustafa Kitab underneath the verse, that translation of it. So someone read that out loudly for us, and I'm going to interrupt you. Okay, so just start reading it.
They are the ones who follow the messenger, the unlettered prophet, whose description they find in the Torah and the gospel.
Okay, that's it. All we need is that first sentence. The rest of the sentence is going to give a description of that unlettered messenger, who is Muhammad. Okay. Now, remember I said before that Muslims do not believe that Muhammad authored the Quran. He is just the vessel through which the Quran was revealed. He is unlettered. Unlettered means he's illiterate. He cannot read and write. Okay. This is a point of faith for Muslims. This is not a disrespect. Okay. They believe just factual about him. And actually, this is why they believe the Quran. Part of the reason why they believe it's a miracle. Okay. Because there's no way an illiterate man could produce such an amazing Arabic, poetic content that's in the Quran. Okay. So just so you understand the point. Okay. So unlettered means he's illiterate. So who is it taught? Who's the illiterate prophet? Muhammad. Okay. So we read that sentence and we say, okay, so they are the ones who follow the messenger, the unlettered prophet, whose description they find in their Torah. I know it's probably too small for you, but it's on your phone. Okay. So then simple. It's very simple. We need to understand it. Don't need to critique it. We're not here critiquing it. We're just saying, okay, so let's try to understand it. Who is it talking about? They are the ones who follow him. Who are they? Yes, it is the Jews, but I want to understand, how did we get there? What in here indicates it's the Jews?
Their Torah.
Yeah, what were you saying? Their Torah. Who had the Torah? Jews, thank you. Okay. And by the way, the Bible is not translated into Arabic in the 7th century. Okay. So if they're going to have access to the Torah, it's a Hebrew Torah. Okay. So who had to have that? The Jews. So it also mentions the gospel or Injil. Forget about it. We're not talking about that. Only Torah. So I say, okay, so we're just going to focus on the Torah since we're talking about what the Quran says about the Torah. So it says, so the Jews, and then who's the unlettered prophet, the messenger? We already established Muhammad, and they're going to obviously Muhammad. Okay, so when? Key question: when? When is this talking about? Thank you. How do we know that? Exactly. When was Muhammad? 7th century. Very simple. We're not complicated. Okay, and actually, what I want you to see is, we cannot make any point. We can't make a point that we can't establish. You should not. I should say, you should not make any point you cannot thoroughly establish. If you overstate anything, you've messed up. Okay, or I've messed up if I do it. So the point is very clearly saying it's Muhammad, the followers of Muhammad. Now, what is a follower of Muhammad called? Muslim. What do Muslims call the followers of Jesus? And let's do any of them. Abraham, Jonah, okay, any of the prophets. What are they called according to Muslims? No. Those are all prophets for Muslims. So if they're following those prophets in their time, what would they be called? A Muslim. Okay. Muslim does not mean a follower of Muhammad. Muslim means a submitted person to God. That's what the word means, is someone who is submitted. Islam means submission. Muslim is the same root, okay? Means to submit. Someone submitted, literally, is what Muslim means. So someone submitted to Allah. Anybody who followed any of Allah's prophets is a Muslim. They don't need to believe in Muhammad before the time of Muhammad. Well, once he's there, you have to believe in him, of course. Okay, but before he's there, they're called Muslims. They're submitted ones to God. and to understand how they're meaning it. So why I'm saying that is we're not. So who is it talking about? Is not. Well, if I just say Muslim in this verse, well, Muslim is ambiguous. It could refer to before the time of Muhammad, right? No. It's in the time of Muhammad, right? So how do we know who these people are? These are specifically Jewish background converts to Islam. Because they are followers of what? The messenger, the unlettered prophet, who is Muhammad. So for them to be a follower of Muhammad, they are converted to Islam, but they have a Torah, meaning they are Jewish background converts in the time of Muhammad. Okay, so it's very simple once you understand it. So it's very simple. So what is this? We read the verse and say, who is the messenger of the unlettered prophet? It's Muhammad. Who are the followers who found him in the Torah? It's not hard to see. Like, you just need to draw it out for them. But I'll ask those kind of questions to get them involved, get them to see it. Okay? Okay, let's, yes.
Gospel, Torah and the gospel. Gospel means what? The gospel.
The gospel means who knows. Okay, and this is the problem why we don't talk about the gospel also. Injil is the Arabic term for gospel. Most Muslims think that Injil or gospel is the book that Jesus wrote that's now lost. Okay, so now you have corrupt books in your New Testament. You got 4 gospels. There's one Injil. It's singular. You have 4 gospels, not by Jesus, secondhand. And now it's corrupted with their theology. Okay, so this is why you cannot talk about the New Testament with them. Okay, so we don't have that same problem with the Torah. Torah is given to Moses, passed down. Okay, so just looking at your handout so you're oriented with it, that verse is under the section Prophecies of Muhammad. Now, I've got 11 sections under the first pillar. There are so many verses, and this doesn't even include all the verses, okay? These are the most useful ones. I went through a couple of years ago. I'm like, okay, after I learned stuff from Alex, I'm like, I want to really expand it and do. I'm a thorough person, okay. So I decided I'm going to reread back through all the Qur'an again and focus on finding any verse that talks about the previous scriptures, and obviously especially about the Torah, but all together, and then look at what precisely are they saying in each place, and what is useful. So this is the result of my study. Okay, I have 11 categories of the ways that the Quran talks about the Torah. That in those 11 categories are ways that you can establish the Torah from the Quran. Some of them are stronger points. Some of them have different points that they're making. But there are whole 11 categories and multiple verses under every category. There is a lot that the Quran says about the Torah. Now, when we're talking about prophecies of Muhammad, Muslims often try to talk about prophecies of Muhammad, and they're going to say Deuteronomy 18:18. They're going to say Isaiah 42 or Song of Solomon 5:16, and so on and so forth. This is not what we're talking about. All we're saying at this point, we're not going to debate that topic. All we're saying is, what does the Quran state? What does it claim? We're not critiquing it. We're not getting into which passages, okay? So we want to move on quickly from this point, but what I want you to see, you need to understand what we're doing. Okay, what we're doing is simply saying the Quran said that there were prophecies of Muhammad found in the Torah by the Jews in the 7th century. That's amazing, because what does that imply about the textual reliability of the Torah in the time of Muhammad? It's good. Because if anything is going to be changed and corrupted, it's going to be that, right? But that was found there. That's the claim. It was found there. Of course, I don't believe it's there, and it's never been there. But that's what the Quran claims. We're going to test the claims eventually, but we need to put it on the table. What does it claim first? Okay? So this is implying. Now, it doesn't get us everything, but it's beginning. And this point, I always like to begin with this verse, because it is so clear in the verse. They found it in their Torah. Okay? That's in the time of Muhammad. So clear that none of them are going to argue about it. They're all going to accept it. Because even many Muslims are going to, as I said, they're going to try to use passages from the Torah even today to try to establish that Muhammad is prophesied in there. That's great. Because all of that implies that that was what was there then. Right? That's all I need. Okay, so coming back to the slideshow. All right, I think I need to go over here. We're going to look at these verses now. 7:157 is definitely, I like to do that. And then in addition to those, if I'm doing very kind of bare minimum, these are ones I'm going to use. Make sure, Alex, I don't forget to do the unbreakable chain as well. Okay, so Surah 2, verses 40 to 41, or 44 you can read too, but we'll just do these two verses for the sake of it. Time. It says, oh, so you can look it up in your, it's on the screen, but it's also, you can look it up on your phone. O children of Israel, remember my favors upon you, fulfill your covenant and I will fulfill mine, and stand in awe of me alone. Believe in my revelations which confirm your scriptures. Do not be the first to deny them or trade them for a fleeting gain. Okay, my question I'm going to first ask is, who is being addressed in the verse? Jews, the children of Israel, okay? Let's, to make sure we never make a misstep, state exactly what it says. Don't say Jews, because Jews, you know, Muslims have some issues with Jews, okay? What is a Jew? What is a Jew? Okay, is that the children of Israel? No, they're not the real ones, the ones today, okay? Okay, the children of Israel, all right? They're being addressed. Who's speaking here is Allah, okay, God. He's addressing the Jews or children of Israel. When, key question we're always going to ask is, when is it being talked about? Sometimes I say, is this the children of Israel back in the time of Moses or some other time? What would help us understand it? Look at verse 41. So this is supposed to be God speaking, right? Believe in my revelations, which all Muslims understand means the Qur'an, which confirm your scriptures. The Torah, because who are we talking about again? Who's being addressed? Children of Israel. What scripture did the children of Israel have? The gospel? No. Okay, they had the Torah. So the Quran, it's very clearly also my revelation, very clearly you can see in the context, it's the Quran, it's not other things. Because it's confirming that the scriptures you have. So that's not the scriptures you have, it's something else. So it's another book. Well, it's the Quran. So the Quran confirming your scriptures, the Torah, at what time? Well, when was the Quran given? 7th century. Okay, so the Quran is confirming it. Well, if it's not there yet, it's not confirming it, right? So it's got to be there. So it's very clearly 7th century. Is it confirming the Torah that was that was before, you know, the original Torah before it got corrupted centuries before Muhammad? Is that what it says? No, it says the Torah, confirming your scriptures, which we know is in that time. Now, in the Arabic, more literally, and if you look this up in the Sahih International translation of this verse, verse 41, it says, confirm that which is with you. Doesn't say confirm your scriptures. Literally, it says confirming that which is with you. With who? The Jews in the time of Muhammad in the 7th century. Not the Torah centuries and centuries before, earlier, that before it got corrupted. No, it's the Torah in that time. Okay? Okay, so what do I mean by the concept? I like to use this demonstration, book demonstration. So you can see it on the screen, but I'll just show you. Okay, so I'll show you. Okay, let me just illustrate my understanding of what the Quran says about confirmation or fulfillment. Okay, as it says, it confirms. Another way to translate that is fulfill. So I always use both terms. It says to confirm or fulfill the Torah. So I say, okay, so put aside what you believe for a second, but let me tell you what I believe in my understanding. So I'm a Christian. I believe the Old Testament. Is your Hebrew Old Testament? I'm also a Christian. I believe in Jesus, and I believe the New Testament scriptures are to be associated with him. Put aside what you think about the New Testament, but just like hypothetically, we say the scriptures associated with Jesus. Okay, so I believe in that too. Great, it actually stands for me. So I'll say, okay, so Jesus claimed to fulfill or confirm the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible. Okay, but let's say hypothetically, he didn't. Let's say Jesus contradicted the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, and he didn't fulfill the prophecies that were about him in the Old Testament. Should I accept him as the Messiah? No, absolutely not. Okay, he'd be a false prophet and false Messiah. But I do believe he did fulfill it, he didn't contradict it, so I do accept him. Now I have both. Okay? See if this one stands. Book of Mormon. Okay? It says, look, it's nice. It says another testament of Jesus Christ. Third testament. I got first, old, new, and third. He says he came and fulfills, actually, he says he's prophesied in the Torah too. In Genesis 50, he added verses in his own translation that talked about him. Okay? So it's nice. It's like the original Torah before it got corrupted, I guess. Right? Same idea. So he says he confirms it. Do you think I accept him? In his book? No. Why don't I accept him?
It contradicts
Because he contradicts it. Because both he claims that he's fulfilling it and it contradicts it, right? If he didn't claim it and he made, like if it was the Vedas, the scriptures of the Hindus, has no relationship to the Bible, it's a completely different religious tradition, I can't just compare it, right? Because the Vedas are not talking about the Bible. But here you got a guy come along, he says, I agree with the ones before. Then I check his book and it doesn't, right?
Sorry, say that again. So
Yeah.
in the Book of Mormon, Jesus added verses to.
No, Joseph Smith, not in the Book of Mormon, in his translation, so to speak, it's called the Joseph Smith translation of the Bible. He translated different parts of the Old and New Testament, although I wouldn't say it's a translation. He just added in stuff in addition to the King James that was not originally there, which I think he believed God revealed it to him, whether he believed it sincerely or not. Okay, that's what I'm talking about.
Oh, okay. And then their version of Jesus is fulfilled in the added scripture to the Old Testament.
Yeah, but I mean, the main thing is that Joseph Smith was prophesied. So that's
Joseph Smith was prophesied.
That's the claim. Okay, but that's the same claim in the Quran, right? The Quran is claiming that Muhammad was prophesied in the Torah. Okay?
But the Mormons still believe Jesus is the Son of God.
Yeah, but completely different concept. He believed that he's a creature who became a god.
I didn't know Joseph Smith or anything. So you're saying
Yeah.
that the Old Testament, they're saying the Old Testament prophesied Joseph Smith.
There you go. So Joseph Smith Jr. is the prophet, the founder of Mormonism. I think in about 1830, the Book of Mormon was published. Okay, in America, American prophet. This is nice to talk to Muslims, right? You accept the American prophet in the 1830s. Okay, he brought a book too. Okay, do you think I accept it? No, of course not. He claimed to fulfill it, and then I checked it. Do you think the claim is enough? He claimed it, so therefore I should accept it, right? No, of course not. Okay, I got to test the claims. Okay, of course. So when I test it, I just say, well, it contradicts it. So what do I do with it? Okay, throw it out. Now we're going to start over for them. New stack. Quran. It's a little Quran. Wouldn't it be better if I use a bigger one? Okay. You believe the Quran, right? Muslim? Now I'm directing it at them. Say, yeah, of course. Do you believe this book? That's the Philosophy of Islam by Mirza Ghulam Ahmed. Mirza Ghulam Ahmed was the founder of a heretical sect of Islam called Ahmadiyya Islam, that all other Muslims regard as a heretical sect and a cult. And he was at the end of the 1800s, early 1900s. Actually, if you've heard of Nabil Qureshi, he was from that movement, not from like Orthodox Islam. It's also why they don't really care what he had to say. So So I know lots of Ahmadis. Okay, they're very nice people. So they believe in another prophet after Muhammad, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, and he doesn't bring scripture, so to speak, but he wrote lots of things. He teaches a lot, and they're authoritative for them. So I said they usually don't. Sometimes they don't know what it is. They're kind of looking at it. I once had a guy say, "I don't know what that is." He said, "But it says Mirza, it's a Hadrat." It's like a honorific title before it, and it's like it's false, because anybody who uses that title, like I was told it's from something false. Okay, I'm like, yeah, okay. So do you want to know why? Okay, it's because he claimed to be. I just get to this chase. He came and claimed that he's another prophet after Muhammad. Do you accept him? No. Why don't you accept him? Because the seal of prophethood, it teaches in the Quran. It says that Muhammad was the seal of prophets, meaning he's the last and final prophet. So if another guy comes along after Muhammad claiming he's a prophet, it contradicts Islam, okay? By definition. But I said, no, but hold on. He says you don't understand seal of prophethood correctly. It doesn't preclude anyone coming after. You just misunderstood it. Do you accept him? No. Why don't you accept him? Because it's not just the term seal of prophet, it's what it really means in the text, right? You're saying he's contradicting it, right? Yes. So do you accept him? No. Why? Because you follow the Quran, which is the earlier authority that's already established, right? And somebody coming along later saying he confirms and fulfills, like he does with the Quran, he claims, the claim isn't enough, right? You got to test the claim, right? Great. So, Old Testament, New Testament, Quran. Quran claims to confirm or fulfill the previous scriptures. We are not talking about the New Testament. We're talking about the Torah. So what does the Quran say about the Torah? This is essentially what we're getting at. It claims to fulfill or confirm it. Now we're looking at that. Okay? So it's a nice demonstration, and I've actually had Muslims tell me, I don't know, this one guy was very well trained in dawah, for outreach to other people, and he brought to the meeting his Bible with all of his those little sticky things to open. He was ready, okay? Not for this, but he was ready to talk to Christians, okay? And at the end of the conversation, he reflected back and he's like, I really like that demonstration. But the way he said it was kind of funny. It was kind of like he liked it. He said it was so clear and beautiful, but it was like he didn't like it at the same time. Okay?
I have a question.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm very ignorant of the Quran. So basically, at that time, they said, okay, the Torah before the 7th century is okay.
No, they don't say anything. Okay, they can say it was all corrupted long before the time of Muhammad. What they say, I always say, look, what you as a Christian say, it doesn't matter. It's what the Bible says. What they as a Muslim say doesn't matter. It's what the Quran says, right? Okay, we're evaluating based on text. Those are the authorities. So we go back to their text to show them that the Quran does not say that it was corrupted before the time of Muhammad. We can see in the Quran it has a high view of the Torah and up until at least the time of Muhammad. Maybe it was corrupted after the time of Muhammad. Okay?
But do they, like us, accept the Old Testament as part of their thing?
Not until we establish it with them.
No, but I mean, do they say Torah as part of their?
They will say, we would believe in the Torah, before it got corrupted.
Yeah, but do they keep a copy of?
No, they don't care. Like I said, they have the updated iPhone. The Quran is the updated version. They don't need the old versions. That's the way they think of it. They say all the previous scriptures are obsolete and irrelevant because the newest scripture, the better version, has come. But it's supposed to be in alignment with the previous ones. Okay? Okay. So let's go through the last couple verses here in this section. We're going to go on to the stories. So Surah 10:94. So this is, we're going to jump, actually, let's do the unbreakable chain first. I don't have it in the slides. So in your handout, because the stories of the prophets I do always do last. If you look, actually the one before called reliable law code. So if you pull up in your phone, Surah 5, chapter 5 in the Quran, verse 43. And you're going to see that section 9 and 10 actually connect. If you look at the two main passages, Surah 5, verse 43. This is under reliable law code in your handout. And the next section called the unbreakable chain, you're going to see it says Surah 5, 43 to 48. Okay, really should say 44 to 48. But these go to right together. They're right next to each other, so I just use them back to back. Okay? So Surah 5:43, we're basically, what I tell them is we're going to look at Surah 5:43, and the next few verses after that, we're going to go one verse at a time. We're going to read the verse, we're going to unpack it, and then go to the next verse. Okay? So Surah 5:43. Can somebody read that out loud for us?
But why do they come to you for judgment when they already have the Torah containing Allah's judgment? Then they turn away after all. They are not true believers.
Great. Does that sound like an unreliable Torah? No. It's saying they already have. Now, who is they? Who is they in the context? Well, who had the Torah? Children of Israel. Or actually, here's Israel means Jacob for Muslims. It doesn't mean a nation. In fact, anytime you see in social media where they talk about verses in the Quran that talk about the land of Israel, it doesn't. It only uses the phrase children of Israel, which means children of Jacob. Okay? It's never talking about the land. So here in verse 43, it says, why do they, this is God speaking to Muhammad. He's saying, why do they come to you? So they are who have the Torah, that's Jews, coming to Muhammad. What time is this again? 7th century, because when was Muhammad? Thank you. All right, so the Torah in the 7th century. All right, why do they come to you for judgment when they have the Torah containing God's judgment? Those little brackets means not in the text, okay? So why, when they already have the Torah containing God's judgment, then they turn away after all? They are not true believers. So in other words, the essence of what this verse is saying is the Jews were being, they're being tricky here. Okay, they're not being sincere. It's always nice, to kind of talk down the Jews a little bit, okay, when you can, with Muslims. All right, and frankly, they did this with Jesus too, right? Okay, when they came to Jesus with questions, the Pharisees, they didn't come with genuine questions. They're not coming this way with Muhammad either. Okay? So they were not, they're trying to trick him. Okay, that's the context. Now, we don't have time to look it up, but if you look at, I'm just going to show you how to look it up, okay? So the reference Sahih Muslim 1700. So I'm going to show you. This is another website you need to have. Sunnah.com. I told you there are two main sources of authority for Muslims, Quran and Sunnah. Sunnah is about what Muhammad taught and his example. So there are, on this website, has collections of Hadith. These are the narrations. And one of those collections is called Sahih Muslim. So you click on that. Now you need to find on the right side here, where it's giving you the Hadith numbers, and you need to find the range that has 1700. That's going to be the Book of Legal Punishments and Book 29. Huh? Okay, and then you're going to scroll down, you're going to see here, it says Sahih Muslim 1684, so you need to scroll down until you get to 1700.
Sorry, which one do I need to start with on the page? Sorry.
Sunnah.com, Sahih Muslim,
Okay, perfect.
and then you need to look for Hadith 1700. Okay? by the way, these are massive collections. Okay, so that's it. There happened to pass by Allah's apostle a Jew, blackened and lashed. Allah's apostle, that's Muhammad, called them the Jews and said, "Is this the punishment you find in your book, i.e. the Torah, as a prescribed punishment for adultery?" They said, "Yes." Now hold on. Is the punishment for adultery in the Torah to blacken someone's face? Definitely not, right? It is stoning. So, are the Jews being truthful? No. They just said that's what we do find in the Torah for the punishment. Okay? And then he said, Muhammad called one of the scholars amongst them, so one of the Jewish scholars, and said, "I ask you in the name of Allah who sent down the Torah on Moses, if that is the prescribed punishment for adultery you find in your book." He said no. So the scholar is now being truthful. This is funny. "Had you not asked me in the name of Allah, I would not have given you this information." Okay? Only because you made me swear in the name of God, I gotta tell you. Okay, fine. We find stoning to death as the punishment prescribed in the Torah, but this crime became quite common amongst our aristocratic class, like adultery. Our elites kept, sleeping around. So when we caught hold of any rich person indulging in this offense, we spared them. But when we caught hold of a helpless person, we imposed the prescribed punishment upon him. We then said, "Let us agree on a punishment which we can inflict both upon the rich and the poor." Let's like not be partial here, okay? So we decided to blacken the face with coal and flog as a substitute punishment for stoning. Thereupon Allah's messenger said, "O Allah, I am the first to revive your command when they had made it dead." He then commanded, and he, the offender, was stoned to death, etc. Okay? So he's saying, he's upholding the Torah according to what it says, right? And the Jews are not upholding it. Look, I'm actually going to agree with Muhammad on this one. Okay? The Jews don't follow the Torah. I think the Quran is right about that. The problem is the Quran doesn't know that so much of the information it included that it got from the Jews was incorrect. Okay? And it goes on to, in the rest of the Hadith, it's going to quote the verses that are in this section in Surah 5 from verse 41 to 47, as that's the context when God revealed those verses to Muhammad. So this is the context. That's why I'm showing you this Hadith. Okay? That's what Hadith often do, is it'll tell you the occasion when certain verses in the Quran were revealed. Okay? So to understand the context, we can go here. Okay? And so when it says, let's go back to Surah 5, 43, it says, "Why do they come to you when they already have the Torah containing God's judgment?" This is what they're doing. They're testing Muhammad. They come to Muhammad to check, is he going to follow what it says in the Torah or not? Is he going to follow what we do, or is he going to follow the Torah? Guess what? He wants to follow the Torah, not what the rabbis say. Okay? And I'm with him on that. We should follow the Torah.
So we could say
Yeah.
Muhammad was right.
Yeah, on this we can say Muhammad was right, for sure. Okay?
So the Torah is given to Muhammad from God, and the Hadith,
Not the Torah, the Quran. Yeah.
and the Hadith is like the journal or the story of.
It's records of orally transmitted sayings of Muhammad that were passed down by his followers. And they eventually get collected, and these are collections. It provides the context. So you cannot, except for a very small minority of Muslims, there are no Quran-only Muslims. There are only a very small number. A Muslim follows both the Quran and the Sunnah. So that's why we have Sunni Muslims, which is 85% of the Muslim population in the world. Okay, they follow this. So this is the context for the Quran. You don't have they don't follow sola scriptura. They have traditions that interpret it. That's why it's also very complicated. So when Christians try to talk about this stuff, often they make mistakes. Yeah.
I just want to say that when you read the Quran, without context from stories of Muhammad from Sunnah, you won't understand it. For example, there is a surah the very, like, I think 5 verses about Abu Lahab.
Yeah, let me find it. Do you remember? No. We got to read it so you can kind of understand what he's
We're
saying.
going to ask you a question. What do you think? What is written there? Because if we use the sola scriptura towards the Quran, so Quran should explain itself. And I will ask you what the Quran explained in this particular small, like 4 or 5 verses. And you will answer at the best you can, and then we'll explain.
I think it's in the 90s, right?
It's 99.
Just looking for the surah for you guys.
It's hard because all these words are like new words to me, so I'm trying to figure out what's what.
Yeah.
It's a palm or ropes. Oh, sorry.
Maybe you can look for it and you can.
Yeah, I'm gonna look for
and
it.
then you can bring it up.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So the point is and then you can read it for everyone. Yeah. So you need to look at so this actually reinforces this is not our idea. Okay. With the way we're reading it, this is very clearly the Torah. Muhammad looked at the Torah in his time as reliable. Okay. Now for Muslims, they don't believe that the Torah was authoritative for non-Jews. Okay. So it's not binding for non-Jews. It was given to the children of Israel. Now that Muhammad has come, they believe Muhammad is the only and first prophet for all of the world. All other prophets, including Jesus, were only sent to their local people. Okay? Yeah, you want to read the verse?
Yeah, so it's 111, easy to remember.
Surah
Surah
111.
111, only 5 verses. May the hands of Abu Lahab perish, and he himself perish. Neither his wealth nor worthy gains will benefit him. He will burn in the flaming fire, and so will his wife, the carrier of thorny kindling. Around her neck will be a rope of palm fiber.
That's the whole chapter.
That's all, folks.
Okay? So what does that mean? You need the context, right? Which is not provided in the Quran. So you can't read the Quran as Quran only or sola scriptura. Yeah. So coming back to 543, and we're going to go on to the next verses, but 543, now some Muslims, actually I'm just going to keep going just for the sake of time. There's so much more I can say. Okay. So 544, key verse. This is a very important verse. So this goes into the next section in your handout called the unbreakable chain. Surah 544 says, indeed we, now Christians, get over it if this is the first time you're reading it, that the plural refers to the one God who is singular. Okay, so every Christian, the first time they read it, they're like, well, how does it say plural? It's the majestic plural, they say. Okay, whatever. Indeed, we revealed, so this is God revealed the Torah. Now, who was the Torah revealed to? You tell me. No. Person. No, Torah. Moses, thank you. Okay. So now they all agree with that, okay? So we ordained for them in the Torah, that's the next verse. Verse 44, we revealed the Torah containing guidance and light, by which the prophets who submitted themselves to God made judgments for Jews. So too did the rabbis and scholars judge according to God's book, with which they were entrusted and of which they were made keepers. So do not fear the people, fear me. Nor trade my revelations for a fleeting gain, and those who do not judge by what God has revealed are truly the disbelievers. Now, does this give you the sense that the Torah has been corrupted and isn't reliable anymore at that time? No. It must be followed by the Jews, at least, okay? And but here I want you to see something. This is an insight I discovered when I was going back through reading through the Quran with this study focus. If you look at what it says, we revealed the Torah, as I said, it's understood as already as Moses. Okay, so revealed to Moses. Then it says, skipped containing guidance and light, by which, so by the Torah, the prophets made judgments for the Jews. That's interesting. There were other prophets who made use of the Torah. So when were those prophets? After Moses, right? Obviously, they had the Torah. They're using it for judgment. I don't think I explained it already, but from an Islamic point of view, can prophets sin? No, not in Islam. Okay, so that's why they're chosen, because they are like perfect moral examples, the best of humanity. Because remember, there's no original sin. Okay, so a Muslim prophet is the perfect example, and so he will not sin, certainly not intentionally, certainly nothing major. Okay? No. None of them. Adam didn't even sin. When he ate from the tree, he didn't sin. He made a mistake. Okay? Because it says in the Quran he forgot. And Satan caught him off guard. Yes. Okay? Different, right? It's in the stories.
And he forgot.
Yeah, I said he forgot. Yeah. Okay, so he's like, and he quickly repented, and God accepted the repentance. Which also establishes all you need to do is repent. You don't need a blood sacrifice or payment, right? Okay. By the way, the rabbis have the same story. All right. Back in 544. Yes. We revealed the Torah. So it's the prophets use the Torah for judgment. The prophets, you have to keep in mind, they're Muslim prophets. Okay. We're looking at it internally. What is the Quran claiming? So from an Islamic point of view, these were sinless prophets who used the Torah. Would they have corrupted it? Would a sinless prophet corrupt God's book? No. Okay, now I want you to get it. Now we just need to establish the timeline of when the prophets were who were using the Torah. Okay? So when were they? Well, from our point of view, you can look on our handout here on page 5. Starting from Moses in the 1400s BC, the prophets, we have the prophets all the way through Malachi, about 400 BC. So from 1400 BC to 400 BC. Now, Muslims accept all the, whatever is prophets in the Old Testament, they're fine with. Okay? Except maybe Deborah and Miriam because they're women. Okay, but all the other prophets, they're fine. Okay, they don't have all of them mentioned in the Quran, but that's fine. If they're in the Old Testament especially, they're fine. So up through Malachi, about 400 BC, they're using the Torah for judgment. Okay, now we have the rabbis come on the scene, which the Quran mentions in that verse. So too did the rabbis and scholars judge according to Allah's book. So the rabbis and Jewish scholars came after the Old Testament. There were no rabbis in the Old Testament. The rabbinical movement, which is the Pharisaical movement, started in the 2nd century BC. So it's intertestamental. So the Quran is mentioning the rabbis. Now, does the Quran really know the timing of it? Not really. Okay. But that's fine. So we can say basically from the prophets and after the prophets, the rabbis were also using the Torah. Now, could the rabbis have corrupted? Well, they're human and they're not prophets. So hypothetically, yes, but look at the way it describes it in the verse. It says, so too did the rabbis and scholars. So too. So like the prophets, they use the Torah for judgment. So they're put in parallel with them. So they're not corrupting it. In fact, I also, look, they judged according to what? What does it say? God's book. Is God's book corrupted? No. Okay? If it's called God's book, definitely not corrupted. Okay, so the rabbis judged according to God's book, not the corrupted book. Okay, great. Well, that brings us up and through the time of Jesus and even after. I mean, rabbis been ever since. Okay, even up till the time of Muhammad. But what I want you to see, I'm going to play a couple video clips, or one video clip. Go. Not that one. Not that one. Oh, I think there's another way of doing it. Finder. There we go. Anybody know who that is? Okay. So if I had people who were like really into Islamic apologetics, then I would know. So this is Yasser Qadi. So he is a sheikh in Texas. He's very prominent. Okay. So here he's going to share a point related to the timing of the prophets who had the Torah. Okay. And I want you to listen very closely.
Yes, the roots of Islam are in Judaism and Christianity, meaning the line of prophets. Yes, the roots of the theology of Islam, they go back all the way to Jerusalem. There is a continuity, and our Prophet ﷺ is coming at the end of a long line of many, many biblical prophets. There has been no prophet since Jesus until our Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And Jesus is at the end of many dozens of prophets that came from the time of Moses up until Jesus. Non-stop, continuously. There had been a whole series of prophets that the Old Testament talks about and the New Testament references. And then our Prophet ﷺ comes and he is proclaiming the message of those prophets, and he is saying, I am following their footsteps. But even as he's following their footsteps, the faith is not Judaism, nor is it Christianity. It has to come to its own. And that is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, so now turn your face away. It is not just a symbolic move.
Okay. So, did you get it? A long line of prophets from Moses to Jesus, from Musa to Isa, from Moses to Jesus, non-stop, continuously. We don't even need to talk about the intertestamental rabbis. There were prophets, I guess, according to Islam. Forget reality, okay? We're just talking about Islam. From Moses to Jesus, there was never any interruption. The children of Israel, this is the way Muslims actually talk. They preach this way. I listen to them. They say, this is one of the many favors that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to the Jews, the children of Israel. That back in the ancient times, they were given, one of the favors they were shown is they always had a prophet. There was never a time they didn't have a prophet from Musa to Isa, from Moses to Jesus. Now that's great. Did the prophets corrupt the Torah that they were using? So when do we have the Torah? According to Islam. Uncorrupted. Until Jesus. At least till Jesus, right? Now, when were the Dead Sea Scrolls? Before. Thank you. Okay, now you understand what we're doing. Because when are Muslims going to say, in the end, they're going to say, when could the manuscripts have been, when did the Torah get corrupted? Before our earliest manuscripts, right? Which would be the Dead Sea Scrolls. Okay, so if that goes back to about 200 BC, well, we got more than 1,000 years between Moses and the Dead Sea Scrolls. A lot can happen in 1,000 years, they'll say. Except the Torah was in the possession of sinless prophets, applying it in judgment from Moses to Jesus. You see? No, none of them know this point. Alex, you want to explain maybe how how Muslims receive the point since I discovered you started using it?
I think they start acknowledging that fact. Yeah, I think you're right. That's what they say. Like, oh, right. I mean, until at least before Muhammad, technically, they agree that Torah could not be changed because first, of course, the Quran comes, then Dead Sea Scroll comes, and it's like Dead Sea Scrolls, the Qumran scripture, right? And then they kind of start saying, okay, yeah, maybe it's fine, right? And that's what ideally we want them to agree with. Until Muhammad time, the Bible or the Torah was not corrupted. Mm-hmm. And then it was changed after that.
Yeah, fine.
Sure, no problem.
Because we have the manuscripts before.
Yeah, so we have manuscripts. We have what called trump card.
Yeah,
it works all the time.
Yeah.
Knowledgeable Muslims will refute every point we say, regardless of the facts, regardless of the Quran. We'll throw the Quran under the bus. Because as soon as we bring the Torah, if any Muslim will say, okay, if Torah is not corrupted, it will literally take us maybe 5-10 minutes to destroy entire Islam by the Torah. Because there is no way to have both Quran and the Torah from one God. but that's what they believe. If they say, oh, sure, the Torah, what you have in your Bible is true, then Quran will be false and will be easily proven very fast.
Yeah.
So the knowledgeable Muslims, they know the stuff. So they will resist the first point like tooth and nails.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, it's also because they already know where you're going to go. So, but most Muslims don't know where you're going to go. So that's why, it's, yeah, go ahead.
They resist the Torah based on what
They don't. Okay, so there is a lot more to share. Okay, so if you look in your handout, starting on page 9, page 9 to 12. Okay, that section. What verses do Muslims say teach corruption? Okay, so that's what they can use. They will only ever use, in my experience, 2 verse 79 and 5 verse 48. Okay? Now, I've included things that they won't, I've studied it more. Okay? So I've found as many things as you can use. So I included that in there. And then I have my key points is basically my notes on it that I added in for you. So you can read through that and, okay? And like I said, you're not going to absorb everything in these 2 sessions. So stay in contact with me if you want to learn, and I'll coach you through it and I'll help you with it, okay? And we have more resources. So they have things that they can say, but in my experience of talking to many Muslims, even ones that know a bunch, okay, they almost never bring up any of these verses. When they do, it's one of those 2 verses. Okay, and they're very easy to answer once you know how to answer it. Okay, you just need to learn how to answer it. And so I would say, I wouldn't say Alex, the way the word might not be the right word, might not be refute. They don't refute it, they rebut it. Okay, so they have a response to it. It's not that they accurately show that what we said was that we misrepresented the Quran. They're actually misrepresenting the Quran. That's what I think you're meaning. Like they have to throw the Quran under the bus because they can't actually follow with what it actually says. They have to make it say that the Torah was corrupted.
So I think the main issue for us here is to show them that we know they are misrepresenting the Quran, and they know that we know what they do.
Yeah.
So that's all.
Yeah. So essentially, we're establishing respect because we're showing our knowledge of the Quran. We're not misrepresenting it. And we're also making some of these points, even their apologists don't know some of these points that we bring up, like we call it the unbreakable chain. So if anybody's looked at like Islamic stuff, you might have heard of an isnad. Isnad is the chain of narration for the passing down of the Hadith, the narrations of things that Muhammad said. They call it the chain, the isnad. So we call it the perfect isnad for the Torah. It is the text of the Torah perfectly passed down by sinless men who are prophets. And not only are they prophets, it says the prophets who submitted themselves to God, it says, even in the verse. So this is perfect, yeah.
I just want to show, when I start using unbreakable chain, 544 is the first in chronological order. So Moses, prophets, rabbis, which is 2nd century BC.
Yeah.
And then Surah 66:12.
Yeah, if you look on your handout, they are listed on your handout.
Yeah.
There. So just explain it to them.
Yeah.
They won't read
So
it.
Surah 66:12 is basically the later part of it. It said about Mary, she testified to the words of her Lord.
Page 5 in your handout.
Yeah. And his scriptures. So scriptures is a written word of God or Allah at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So it means in the time of Mary, it was a scripture, reliable scripture. Then we go to the Surah 19:12.
Sorry, Mary, mother of Jesus.
Yes.
They're saying is a prophet.
Not
No.
a prophet.
She
Okay, but she's
testified.
like a saintly woman. Okay. But she testifies to the scriptures,
Which is
which
Kitab.
would be which scriptures? Torah. She's a Jew.
Not only the words of her Lord, which is a verbal communication by Gabriel, but also for the scriptures. That's what we're looking for. We're saying, oh, in the time of Mary, scripture was there. She testified the scripture. John the Baptist, it's Surah
19.
19:12. It said, "O Yahya, John the Baptist, hold on to the scriptures." And then we have 546 about Jesus, Isa al-Masih.
Yeah, 546 is
Yeah.
in the unbreakable chain, yeah.
So then Jesus is, confirming with gospel, with Injil, confirming the Torah. And then we go back to 543. And now it's Muhammad. And how do Jews, come to you, O Muhammad, with a question, and then they have a Torah?
And they already have it, yeah.
They already have a Torah. So from Moses 544, then 66:12, then 19:12, 546, 543.
Okay.
Chronological
Yeah.
order of Islam.
So okay, so that's how Alex goes through it. You can I usually just go 43 to 48 and go through it. But those are sort of supporting verses. You can do a different way, but those to make sure you understand how those verses are relevant. Okay, so let's go to the last section on Pillar 1, which is page 6. Okay, and Surah 10:94, which is also on the screen. Okay, so it says, "If you, O prophet, are in doubt about these stories that we have revealed to you, then ask those who read the scripture before you." Okay, let's unpack that. So if you, now, I always say, I always say to Muslims, Christians often misrepresent this verse. They always talk about it as if Muhammad was doubting. Muhammad can't doubt because he's a prophet. Okay? So now, if you make a point, if you're talking about Muhammad doubting, you've lost them. Okay? We don't need Muhammad to doubt. All we need to do is understand the verse. So if you're in doubt about this, so in other words, the ones who are hearing the verses in the Quran here being recited to them by Muhammad, the audience, the original audience of these verses, if you're in doubt about these stories that we have revealed to you, that God has revealed in the Quran, then ask those who read the scripture before. Now, this is why I really, at this point, I use the Clear Quran, the physical book. Okay. And I will share with you, I have a PDF of it I can share with you guys, but I'll just read out loud to you what they are. So what I'll say is, okay, so if you look in the brackets there, it says these stories in brackets. So that's not in the Arabic. But I'll say, look, Mustafa Khattab, the translator of the Clear Quran, I think he put that in there for a good reason. And he's not the only one that does it. But it says these stories because he's providing the context. He's in doubt about what? Well, the context from verse 71 to 93, and what I say is I'll show them in the book, and it has headings, and I'll just say, like, I'll just show them and I'll just read the headings so they can see the context. From verse 71, it says, Noah and his people, then messengers after Noah, then Moses and Aaron, the end of Pharaoh, and then the last verse, 93, indeed we settled the children of Israel in a blessed land, etc. Then we get to 94. If you're in doubt about what? The stories about Noah and Moses. So let me ask you a question. Who was reading about Noah and Moses in their scriptures before the Quran was revealed? Children of Israel, the Jews who had the Torah, right? In which scriptures do we read about Noah and Moses? Torah. Okay, so this is very clear. This is what you just have to think through it a little bit. So it's talking about if you're in doubt about the Quranic verses just being revealed, which are about Noah and Moses and Pharaoh, then go ask the people who've been reading the scriptures before. When was that? When is it talking about? 7th century. When the Quran is being given, if you're in doubt about these verses, go ask the people, who is that? The Jews who have the Torah, and they're going to check the stories, right? Great. So that means the Torah is reliable or unreliable when it comes to the stories of the prophets? Reliable. Because what is the expectation? They're going to go and the Jews are going to corroborate it. Great. Next verse, 12:111. Very key verse also. By the way, if I only had one verse, only had time for one verse, I might use 19 or 1094 or 12:111. If I only had one time for one. That's me. So, and because we're going to get to the stories after this pillar, right? So this transitions us. I always put this last when I go through a bunch to transition us. So then it says, in their stories. Now, who was there? In verse 110, the messengers. This is another way of talking about the prophets. So in their stories, in the stories of the prophets and messengers, there is truly a lesson for people of reason. This message cannot be a fabrication. Rather, it is a confirmation of previous revelation, a detailed explanation of all things. Okay? So, why is the Quran not a fabrication? Because it confirms the stories of the prophets in the details. Thank you. Okay? And when? Clearly in the time of Muhammad, as we also saw in 1094, they could corroborate it. So then what we can do is then ask them, use this little booklet that was back in the day from the Royal Ontario Museum when it had some of the Dead Sea Scrolls on exhibit. Say, have you heard of the Dead Sea Scrolls? And often, you know what they say? No, what are they? It's amazing. They don't even know, a lot of them. Now, some of them know. Then my follow-up question is, what have you heard of them? Because I've had people say really crazy things that they just clearly don't know what they're talking about. So that's really great when they don't know what they're talking about, because now guess who's the teacher? Okay? They want to be your teacher. Okay? If you've ever talked to them, they want you to mess up. They want you to not know what you're talking about. Look, you don't understand what you're talking about with Islam. Let me teach you. Let me tell you. Okay? We're reversing it. So, but we're being nice about it. So I want you to see this is the position we're taking. We are informing them about something that they don't know. And when we're doing that, they listen. Okay? So what we then share is, okay, what are the Dead Sea Scrolls? Well, that's Hebrew manuscripts mostly of many different texts, including copies, which would be fragmentary copies of all of the books of the Old Testament, with the exception of Esther and Nehemiah, okay, which are not relevant for our conversation. So we have multiple copies, especially of the Torah. Again, they're fragmentary. They're not complete. But look at what it says. Here is an example from it. This is a portion of manuscript from Genesis, which says that it is dated between 125 BC to 100 BC. That's before Jesus. Okay? Christians didn't do it. All right? So if you're going to accuse it of corruption, not the Christians. Okay? The copies, it says, of Genesis among the Dead Sea Scrolls are extremely similar to the traditional Hebrew text. Okay? Extremely similar, key phrase. It doesn't mean there's no difference whatsoever, but it's basically the same thing. Okay? It's going to be the same stories, same doctrine. We don't care about doctrine anymore. We're just going to talk about the stories. We don't read anything. So, in other words, I just transition to say, when we look at a modern English translation with a modern English, not King James or New King James, because they are not based on the best manuscripts. A modern English translation is based on the best manuscripts, which include the earliest, including the Dead Sea Scrolls. So all we have to do is open it and read it. So let's do that. So now our transition is I want to share with you a story. Okay? So, because the claim is, now we're in the second pillar. So the claim is what? The Quran affirms the stories of the prophets in the Torah in detail. Does that mean that it's gonna be okay to find contradictory information in it? No. Right? Now you could have different information that's harmonizable. That would be fine. But if it contradicts, that's the problem. Yeah.
So what you said about the Dead Sea Scrolls, that it's extremely similar. I thought it was like the same.
No, I mean there's little differences.
Like in just wording or in the stories or
Words.
Wording.
Yeah,
Just
but
words.
they are irrelevant.
Yeah.
Because we went through and we find some of them, and when we talk to Muslims, we show them. I try to do it online all the time. And in that case, but I'm still following that rule, which Greg said, we're going to use
Only
Quranic
parallel things.
parallel things. Whatever Quran said about Moses, we're going to find the same story in the Torah, and then we can compare all the copies of the Torah scrolls from ancient time and to medieval time with today electronic versions, and we find some differences, but they are absolutely irrelevant.
Okay, I'm going to ask a quick question. Are people good if we stayed at 12:30? Okay. Okay, so maybe is it okay if we go till then, and then we'll send you the recording too, so you won't miss it, okay? So if you need to, like if you have to go, but I'd like to get through a bit more today. Okay, so the stories is really where it matters. Let's try to be quick on this one. Okay, so let us read. We're going to go through it in the order that we would go through it with a Muslim, okay? So we always start Quran first. Okay, we're going to do the Quranic passage and then the biblical passage. Now, I want you to have in your head the biblical story of Joseph, okay? When he's thrown into the well and then the bloody shirt is brought back by the brothers to their father Jacob. And I want you to think in your head, how did Jacob react when he saw the bloody shirt? Let's read the Quran. Surah 12. Surah 12, by the way, if you're going to start reading the Quran, which I do advise, read the Quran and focus on the stories when you see it, and you will never believe it. It's okay. I'm not worried. All right, so in Surah 12 is a really good place to start. Chapter 12, it's the story of Joseph, all in one place. Okay, so it's very easy to follow, and you can compare it to Genesis 37 to 50. So here we find at that point in the story, the brothers have thrown him in the well in verse 15, and now they're going to come back in verse 16. 16 to 18. Then they returned to their father in the evening, weeping. They cried, "Our father, we went racing and left Joseph with our belongings, and a wolf devoured him. But you will not believe us, no matter how truthful we are." And they brought his shirt stained with false blood. He responded, "No. Your souls must have tempted you to do something evil, so I can only endure with beautiful patience. It is Allah's help that I seek to bear your claims." So what is Jacob saying?
Calling all the boys a liar.
Calling them a liar. So does he think Joseph is alive or dead? Alive. Because they're saying he's dead. He's saying no. Alex, you want to read the other verse? The supporting verse later? So later in the same surah, I don't have it on the screen, and actually you should write it down. What's the verses?
Could you please write down, like after Surah 16, 18, Surah 12, of course, 84 to 87.
84 to 87.
Then, of course, Surah 12, 94 to 96.
84 to 87 and
4
to 96.
96.
Okay. So this is toward the end of the story of Joseph in the Quran. Yeah, go ahead.
He turned away.
To give the context for them.
Yeah, so they're coming back to father and saying, "Oh, we lost Benjamin because he was a thief."
They came back from their trip to Egypt. Yeah.
Now he said he turned away from them, lamenting, "Alas, poor Joseph." That was Benjamin get stuck in Egypt, but he's talking about Joseph. They say, "By Allah, you will not cease to remember Joseph until you lose your health or even your life." He replied about Allah, and then he said, 87. Now he's sending them back to Egypt. "O my sons, go and search diligently for Joseph and his brother." And then go to 94, when Joseph revealed himself and sent all the brothers back. They say, "And then the caravan departed from Egypt. Their father in Canaan said to those who are around him, 'You might think I am senile, but I certainly sense the smell of Joseph,'" like smell of living person. They replied, "By Allah, you are definitely still in your old delusion," meaning whatever, so many years back. But then the bearer of good news arrived. He cast the shirt over Jacob's face, So he regained his sight. Jacob then said to his children, "Did I not tell you that I truly know from Allah what you don't know?" You remember I told you before? I don't believe your report. When you came with the bloody shirt. That's confirmation.
Yeah, so in other words, Joseph or Jacob, all throughout the story in the Quranic narrative, he believes Joseph is still alive. He didn't believe the original report, and by the end of the story, they're like, you can't get over it. You keep talking about this old delusion that Joseph is alive, right? And when he sent them down there, search for Joseph. Okay, let's go to the biblical narrative. Genesis 37. Okay, and let's go to verse 32, just before the highlight. The brothers sent the robe of many colors and brought it to their father and said, "This we have found. Please identify whether it's your son's robe or not." And he identified it and said, "It is my son's robe. A fierce animal has devoured him. Joseph is without doubt," I love that phrase, "without doubt torn to pieces." Then Jacob tore his garments and put sackcloth on his loins and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted and said, "No, I shall go down to Sheol to my son mourning." Thus his father wept for him. Is that the same story? So is it from the same author? Okay, there you go.
Verses 25 to 28. Let me read it. Now they coming back from Egypt, as the Quran described before. So they went out of Egypt and came to the land of Canaan to their father Jacob, and they told him, "Joseph is still alive, and he is ruler over all the land of Egypt." And his heart became numb, for he did not believe them. But when they told him all the words of Joseph, which he had said to them, and when he saw the wagons which Joseph has sent to carry him, the spirit of their father Jacob revived. And Israel said, "It's enough. Joseph, my son, is still alive. I'll go and see him before I die." So it shows clearly when Jacob believed wholeheartedly for 23 years, Joseph is dead. When then the sons came and said, "Oh, you know, Father, Joseph is alive," he didn't believe them. They have to convince him. And finally, he convinced, "It's enough. Okay, I'll go and see him until I die," that's Revelation, 23 years later. In the Quran, it's completely opposite.
He's the one who's been saying Joseph is definitely alive, and it's like he can't stop talking about it. Yeah.
This is
Cassandra,
chapter 45 of Genesis, 25 to 28.
Yeah. So the point is, both accounts are internally consistent. Okay? They are not contradicting within themselves. But to each other, they're completely different. So you have to think to yourself, why would the Jews change that? This is where the real problem is. It's not pillar one. It's the stories. It's the specific details. Notice, remember, details, not doctrine. We're not debating theology. We're saying, okay, so they're gonna in the end say the Torah must have been corrupted. Amazing. So now you're gonna have to explain to me, why did the Jews change this story in that way? They don't have an explanation. There is no explanation. And then I'm going to ask, before I go to your question, I want to ask you guys, estimate 98 verses about Joseph in the Quran. 98 verses. I want you to imagine, guess, and if you already know the answer, don't say it. How many differences do you imagine there might be between the Bible, the book of Genesis, and the Quran when there are 98 verses in the Quran about Joseph? That would be crazy, right?
Close
Okay.
enough, right?
That would be crazy. So I did a chart. I'm doing charts on all the prophets, by the way, where I identify all the differences in detail, and I've done the Joseph chart. Okay. This is my summary chart. I don't know if you can see it. Joseph, 98 verses in the Quran, 941 differences. That's 9 6.6 differences per verse in the Quran. Are we talking about the same story? Why is nobody talking about this? Muslims don't know it. No Christian apologist ever has talked about it. In fact, academics haven't even sat down and compared it all in detail. I've looked for writings on it. There's some, but it's like surface level, not detail. So that's what I'm trying to do. 941. Can you imagine? They got to explain all of it. We like to say, look, before we're going to talk about Jesus, we got to talk about Adam, because you know what? This is the same for all of them. Look for Adam. I did Adam already. 79 verses, 124 differences. Cain and Abel. There's only 5 verses in the Quran on Cain and Abel. There's 31 differences. Okay? Noah, there's 113 verses on Noah. There's a lot in there. 148 differences. What else? Lot, there's 102 verses on Lot. That's the lowest ratio. 74 differences. It's still a lot for 102 verses. Okay, forget Job for now. Okay, that's the big one, but that's funny.
So, what, like Moses, you're saying there's no difference?
I haven't compared it yet. So this is my working chart.
Blue, you're still doing.
The blue are the verses that are total. Yeah, I haven't done them yet. I'm getting there. Yeah, there are 459 verses on Moses. Can you imagine how many differences we're going to find? Okay, this is all the same. So it's huge. So you can't just the Jews couldn't just simply change something. They got to change everything else that follows from it. Okay? Why would they change Jacob's reaction? Doesn't make sense. So I always just simply say, and this is getting ahead of ourselves, but I want you to understand it. At the end, after we've gone through all of our 5 points, we've gone through various stories, and then if they're going to push back at all, they say, okay, so we're not going to move on to Jesus. We're not moving on to anything. They have to answer it. Okay? And so if they're going to say, oh, the Torah was corrupted, I say, okay, it's amazing. You think the Torah was corrupted. We're not going back to Pillar 1 because they never go back to Pillar 1. They never offer another verse. They just say it must have been corrupted. Oh, okay. So corrupted in general? No. Specifically, why did the Jews change that? Okay. Now, I mean, I want evidence. I need a Hebrew copy of the Torah before the time of Muhammad that says it. Okay. But we'll leave that off until the end. Okay. First, you got to explain to me why. Give me a motivation. Because, let me ask you, is this kind of change that we just looked at with Jacob's reaction, could this be explained as an unintentional mistake that a scribe made when he was copying the manuscript? No, way too much, right? Now, if it was like he did cry and he did not cry and he missed the word, but here it's, he was without doubt torn to pieces, he tears his own clothes, his sons and daughters rise up to comfort him, refuses to be comforted, I'll go down to Sheol crying. Okay, that is totally different than, no, I don't believe you. Okay, so let me just finish my point, okay? So it's not unintentional, okay? It's not an accident. So that means it has to be, if it happened, it had to be intentional. Now I'm going to say if it was intentional, you need a motive. So now I'm going to give you 4 hypothetical motives, and we're going to go through one at a time and identify whether it applies or not. Because if there's not even a hypothetical motive, then it didn't happen, okay? And it didn't happen accidentally. So what are the motives I say? Theological motives. So you're changing a doctrinal or theological issue. Second, ethical or morality. You're changing teaching about ethics. Third, prophecies of Muhammad are being affected. Fourth, political motive. And I say, if you can think of another, we'll add it to the list. Nobody does. Okay, so was there any theology that's changed in that story by changing Jacob's reaction? No. Is there any teaching about ethics or morality changing? No, it's a story. 3, anything about Muhammad being prophesied that's changing? Nope. What's the political motive? I mean, in the end, even according to their account, they end up with the land of Canaan. Okay, like we have at the end of the book of Genesis. Okay, there's promises that they're going to get the land. Okay, they end up in Egypt under the time in the time of Joseph. It's the same thing in the rest of the Quran. Okay, so there's no difference even there. So what? There's no political relevance. See? So if there's no motive, then it wasn't intentional, and it wasn't unintentional. Therefore, it didn't happen. Okay. So now we can apply this to every detail. We got 941 to go through just for Joseph. Okay, now we're not going to actually do that, but we're going to tell them the number. I'll ask them the same question I asked you. How many differences do you think there'd be? Do you think that they're surprised? Yes. Very surprised. Actually, do you see the total I have working? 2,356 so far. I'm probably about halfway. Okay, so probably about 5,000. Okay, that's a little different, right? So, were you going to say something, Alex? Let's see. Okay.
I just wanted to.
Yeah.
The present day Torah, does it line up with the Quran? Like, do you see the same changes? Because you said the rabbinical Torah is what they're
the oral Torah?
oral. Now they've written down that oral Torah because it doesn't match the original Torah that we get in the Old Testament?
Okay, so oral Torah is just their way of talking about all their rabbinical traditions were originally revealed by God to Moses. So there are there's you saw, there's a sea of literature for the Hadith and all this stuff. It's the same thing in Jewish sources. They have a whole sea of literature for the Talmud and rabbinical commentaries and so on. So what I will say is the Quran, when you look at the stories, this is later in our approach, okay? At the end of your handout, we have a section, we have two other supplementary arguments we add to the master key. And the third argument, we call all of it the trilogy. The third one we're going to layer on. If they're being difficult, we just layer on more stories, okay? And we hold them to that, and we add more, and we add more until they break, or they give up and they walk away, okay? So the third layer is called Midrash. Midrash refers to legends that Jews developed about the various characters in the Old Testament. So they wrote stories about Adam and Noah and Abraham and so on, originally oral and then written down and so on. Much of that is before the time of Muhammad, starting in the intertestamental period all the way through, really until today. They're still telling stories. Okay. Guess what we find in the Quran? Midrashic stories. In the stories of the prophets, the biblical prophets, we don't just get parallel with the biblical account. We have a parallel with the Midrashic legends. Okay? Because that is in the stories, embedded in them. Because how would these stories have been learned by Muhammad? The Jews told them orally. So when they tell stories about Noah or Moses or so on, they're not saying this is what we find in our text and this is what we teach orally. They're just telling about those people based on the text of the Torah and their traditions. Okay? So that's why in the Quran it's mixed in. And actually in the end of the handout, when we look at it on Midrash, we have 10 examples of Midrashic elements just in the story of Joseph. Okay.
I want to say about you might question why Muhammad said Jacob didn't believe in Joseph's death. Like, what's the reason? Well, when you read Midrash, actually, that's what the rabbi said. He didn't believe them. In the beginning, he believed, and then he realized Joseph was alive. And he was talking about Joseph being alive. And he sent them back to Egypt, hoping they will find Joseph. That's in Midrash, and we're like, oh my goodness, that's why Muhammad put it in the Quran. He heard Midrashic account, not biblical account. And Midrash contradict the Torah, but Quran and Midrash very close. I mean, they have a lot of contradiction as well, which is fun to find. But the Quran is very close to the Midrash rather than the Torah.
Yeah.
I was asking is there is a present day Torah that the Jewish people follow, yeah?
No, they follow, their text is our text. Okay? And they have other books that tell stories, right? So that's why I say they don't really follow the Torah. Yeah. They're really following their other texts. Yeah. Right. Cool. Okay. All right. We're good to continue. The rest of us who are here, so we'll go till 12:30. Okay. So we'll probably recap this point next time a little bit because it is very vital. This is, like I said, this is the most important pillar, the third pillar. Okay, so this is the claim that Abraham and Ishmael traveled to Mecca and built the Kaaba. Okay? So the question, we just simply need to, okay, if I'm going to transition from pillar 2 to pillar 3 with them, I say, okay, now I'm going to share with you another story. Okay, my question to you is, as a Muslim, I'm going to ask you, do you believe that Abraham and Ishmael traveled to Mecca and built the Kaaba? And every Muslim is going to say, yes, it's a non-negotiable belief. Okay, there's a reason why we ask that question. Do you believe is personal? Because there are different sources that talk about, that we can look at, okay? Our argument is not dependent on whether they're going to accept the source or not. Because the reality is they believe that Abraham had to travel with Ishmael to Mecca and build the Kaaba, because what they believe, you've probably heard the Hajj. The Hajj is the pilgrimage that all Muslims are expected to go on once in their lifetime if they have financial means, to travel to Mecca, and they circumambulate the Kaaba. And part of that also is they do various rituals that are there. And all of those rituals and the Kaaba itself and all of that, the Hajj, the pilgrimage, is based in the narrative that we're going to talk about in this pillar, okay? This is why it is absolutely non-negotiable for them. They must believe that Abraham and Ishmael went there. Otherwise, they didn't build the Kaaba. They didn't establish the rituals that they all do. Doesn't matter their sect. They all want to go to Mecca, do the rituals, and circumambulate the Kaaba, okay? Okay, so we ask them that simply because now we're not going to argue about sources. And we don't normally anyway. So you can understand, you need to understand the geography. Okay? Our approach is focused on the stories, but we also use maps. You need to understand the maps. So look where Mecca is on the map. Okay? Western Saudi Arabia, on the western coast, central. Now that's very big. Look where Israel is relative to that. Okay? From Israel to Mecca is quite a long way. Quite a long way. So they believe Kaaba, that's the Kaaba. Okay, so these are the essential sources we're going to use. I think I added some more in your handout, but this is the bare bones, kind of. All right, so we are going to look at the Islamic narrative first. Okay, and I'm going to actually read it to you, the relevant sections of it, and I want you to see it. So you can, if you were to pull it up on your phone, and you can also bookmark it, I find it's helpful to have bookmarked. It's in Sahih al-Bukhari, which is one of the collections on Sunnah.com. So if you went to Sunnah.com, look at Sahih al-Bukhari. That's generally regarded as kind of like the most authoritative collection that they follow. And then the Hadith number is 3,364. Okay, this is the text. Okay, so it says that it's narrated by Ibn Abbas. It says the first lady to use a girdle was the mother, i.e. Hagar, of Ishmael. Okay, so what we're talking about is Hagar and Ishmael. What I want you to get in your head is, what story are we going to compare? Is Hagar and Ishmael separating from Abraham? We're going to look at that in the Islamic account and in Genesis. Okay, we're not going to go there yet, but I wanted you to have it in your head. It's Genesis 21 that we're going to be going to. Okay, but we're going to read the Islamic account first of how Hagar and Ishmael separated from Abraham. And I want you to think in your account how so similar it must be, right? So it says she used a girdle so that she might hide her tracks from Sarah. Abraham brought her, that's Hagar, and her son Ishmael while she used to nurse him at her breast. to a place near the Kaaba under a tree on the spot of Zamzam at the highest place in the mosque. During those days there was nobody in Mecca, nor was there any water. Now let me explain. When it says the place that they were brought to, none of those things really were there yet. This is telling you, like the Muslims in the time of Muhammad, where they were brought to. They were brought where the Kaaba would be built, okay, because it wasn't built yet really, and also near the Zamzam well. This is the well that they all drink from when they go on the Hajj pilgrimage, okay? So it's telling you, even though these things weren't there yet, this is where they were brought, where all that's about to happen. Okay, so it says, so he made them sit over there and placed, also note that sentence, during those days, there was nobody in Mecca, nor was there any water. Nobody lived in Mecca at the time. There were no buildings. There was no civilization. It was a barren wilderness. So Abraham brought Hagar and baby nursing infant Ishmael down from Canaan to Mecca to a barren valley, okay, where nobody lived. And it says, so he made them sit over there and placed near them a leather bag containing some dates and a small water skin containing some water, and set out homeward, meaning back to Canaan. Ishmael's mother followed him, saying, "O Abraham, where are you going, leaving us in this valley where there is no person whose company we may enjoy, nor is there anything to enjoy?" She repeated that to him many times, but he did not look back at her. Then she asked him, "Has Allah ordered you to do so?" He said, "Yes." She said, "Then he will not neglect us." This is a way of saying she has great faith, okay? She's trusting God will take care of them. And returned while Abraham proceeded onwards. And on reaching the Thania where he could not see them, he faced the Kaaba, meaning where it will be built, and raised both hands, invoking Allah, saying, and this is a verse from Surah 14, verse 37 in the Qur'an. He said, "O our Lord, I have made some of my offspring dwell in an uncultivated valley by your sacred house," the Kaaba at Mecca, up to, etc. It's telling you what verse was revealed. Okay, so this is saying, that verse is referring to this, and that also shows you, this is not just in the Hadith, it's in the Qur'an. The Qur'an just doesn't give you the full story. So we go to the Hadith to get the full story. But the Qur'an is saying that Abraham brought some of his offspring, namely Ishmael, down to Mecca and made them live there, and it was an uncultivatable valley. Okay, nobody lived there. Going on, Ishmael's mother, so Hagar, went on suckling Ishmael and drinking from the water she had. When the water in the water skin had all been used up, she became thirsty, and her child also became thirsty. She started looking at him, i.e. Ishmael, tossing in agony. She left him, for she could not endure looking at him, and found that the mountain of Safa, mountain really means hill, called Safa, was the nearest mountain to her on that land. She stood on it and started looking at the valley keenly so that she might see somebody, but she could not see anybody. Then she descended from Safa, and when she reached the valley, she tucked up her robe and ran in the valley like a person in distress and trouble, till she crossed the valley and reached Marwa, where she stood and started looking, expecting to see somebody, but she could not see anybody. She repeated that, running between Safa and Marwa 7 times. So she ran across the valley back and forth, up one hill to the other hill on either side, looking for help 7 times. Okay, by the way, Muslims reenact this when they go on the Hajj. This is called the Sa'i. Sa'i is talking about running back and forth 7 times between Marwa and Safa, just like Hagar did. Okay? So then it goes on to say, this is the source, Muhammad said, this is the source of the tradition of Sa'i, the walking of the people between them, Safa and Marwa. When she reached Marwa for the last time, she heard a voice, and she asked herself to be quiet and listen attentively. She heard the voice again and said, "Oh, whoever you may be, what you have made me hear your voice. Have you got something to help me?" And behold, she saw an angel at the place of Zamzam digging the earth with his heel, or with his wing, till water flowed from that place. She started to make something like a basin around it, using her hands in this way, and started filling her water skin, etc. So she sees an angel digging a hole, and now water's coming out. This is the opening of the Zamzam well. Let's go down to the next, not the first paragraph there, but the next one. Muhammad added, then she drank water and suckled her child. The angel said to her, don't be afraid of being neglected, for this is the house of Allah, which will be built by this boy and his father. And Allah never neglects his people. So here's a promise. Ishmael's going to grow up and he's going to build the Kaaba with his father in that area. The house, i.e. the Kaaba, at that time was on a high place resembling a hillock, and when torrents came, they flowed to its right and left. She lived in that way till some people from the tribe of Jurhum, notice this, were a family from Jurhum, passed by her and her child as they, i.e. the Jurhum people, were coming through the way of Kada. They landed in the lower place of Mecca where they saw a bird that had the habit of flying around water and not leaving it. They said, this bird must be flying around water, though we know that there is no water in this valley. They sent 1 or 2 messengers who discovered the source of water and returned to inform them of the water, so they all came towards the water. Ishmael's mother was sitting near the water. They asked, do you allow us to stay with you? She replied, yes, but you will have no right to possess the water. They agreed to that. So in other words, they're moving into the valley now. There's water there, they can live there. There's a nomadic tribe, an Arab tribe of Jurhum that moves in. Ishmael's mother was pleased with the whole situation, as she used to love to enjoy company of the people, so they settled there. And later on they sent for their families who came and settled with them, so that some families became permanent residents there. The child, i.e. Ishmael, grew up and learned Arabic from them. Now he learned Arabic from them, so they were already Arabic speaking. So they are Arabs. By the way, is Ishmael the father of the Arabs, even according to Islam? No. Okay, they were already Arabs. He learned Arabic from them, and his virtues caused them to love and admire him as he grew up. When he reached the age of puberty, they made him marry a woman from amongst them. So who did Ishmael marry? A Jurhamite woman. An Arab woman from the tribe of Jurhum, when he reached the age of puberty. After Ishmael's mother had died, Abraham came after Ishmael's marriage in order to see his family that he had left long ago, but he did not find Ishmael there. He asked his wife about him. Okay, and I'm going to skip this. We're going to, if we have time in the later session, to come back to it. But it's going to tell a story about Abraham didn't meet Ishmael when he came back, but he ran into Ishmael's wife, and they have a conversation. He basically gives a coded message to her to relay to Ishmael when Ishmael comes home because he's out hunting. And Abraham, though he traveled all that way, he didn't want to stay, I guess, to see Ishmael come back home. Okay? So he went all the way back to Canaan, but he left a coded message for his wife to communicate to Ishmael to divorce his wife because he didn't like her. So Ishmael came home and talked to his wife, and the wife communicates the message. He realizes, oh, it's my father, and he told me to divorce you. So he divorces the wife, and Abraham comes back a second time. Guess what? Same scenario. Ishmael's out hunting. He meets the second wife, but he likes that wife, so he gives a coded message to relay to Ishmael when he returns, because Abraham left back to Canaan again. And the wife tells the coded message to Ishmael, and he concludes, oh, it was my father, and he said to keep you. Then Abraham returns again. Let's find where it is. Okay. Second paragraph there. Then Abraham stayed away from them for a period as long as Allah wished and called on them afterwards. He saw Ishmael first time. So how old is Ishmael? He's been married twice now. Well, 25 maybe? He married the first one at puberty. He's got to divorce her, marry another wife, and then after that, he's in his 20s. Okay? Abraham hasn't seen Ishmael since his infancy. See? So he saw Ishmael under a tree near Zamzam, sharpening the arrows. Well, that's exactly where he left him the first time, on the spot of Zamzam. Okay, and when he saw Abraham, he rose to welcome him, and they greeted each other as a father does with a son, or a son does with a father. Abraham said, O Ishmael, Allah has given me an order. Ishmael said, do what your Lord has ordered you to do. Abraham asked, will you help me? Ishmael said, I will help you. Abraham said, Allah has ordered me to build a house here, pointing to a hillock higher than the land surrounding it. Then they go on to build the foundations of the Kaaba together. That is the story. Now we go to Genesis. Okay, Genesis, we're going to go to the context before we go to Genesis 21. I mean, did that sound like Genesis 21 to you? Thank you. Okay, but remember, what are we comparing? The story of Abraham separated from Hagar and Ishmael. That's the story, right? He left them behind. So, Genesis 17, verses 23 to 25. It says, Abraham took Ishmael his son and all those born in his house or bought with his money, every male among the men of Abraham's house, and he circumcised the flesh of their foreskins that very day, as God had said to him. Abraham was how old? 99 when he was circumcised, and Ishmael his son was 13. Thank you. So Ishmael was circumcised at 13. Abraham was circumcised at 99 on the same day. In Canaan, by the way. 20 verse 1 tells us where they were living. The very end of the verse, it says they sojourned in Gerar. Now, Gerar, I always tell them, that's basically Gaza. Okay? Everybody knows where Gaza is. Now we're going to go to our main passage, chapter 21. And now, just for simplicity's sake, to remember it, the reference, 21 verses 1 to 21. That's that verse, that passage we're going to use for this pillar 3, and the next one. Okay? Because the next pillar, we're going to talk about Ishmael as well. But we're not going to read to verse 21. We're going to read just up to 19, and then we're going to use the next two verses in the next pillar. Okay? But we're basically using the same story in pillar 3 and 4. So to isolate the main verses, verse 5, Abraham was 100 years old when Isaac was born to him. How old was Ishmael?
14.
Thank you. He's 14 because how old was Abraham when he was circumcised?
99.
And how old was Ishmael?
13.
So when Abraham is 100, how old is Ishmael?
14.
Thank you. So when Isaac is born, Ishmael is 14. Verse 8. The boy, that's Isaac, grew and he was weaned. Now, approximately how old would Isaac be when he was weaned? 2 to 3, probably 3, especially ancient times. They don't have formula. Okay, so 3 years old. So how old, if Isaac was 3, how old was Ishmael? 17. Not a nursing infant? Okay. 17. So it said, Abraham made a great feast on the day Isaac was weaned. Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptian, whom she had given birth for Abraham, laughing. So Ishmael was mocking Isaac. And she said to Abraham, kick out this maidservant and her son, because the son of this maidservant will not inherit with my son Isaac. And the matter was wrong in the eyes of Abraham on account of his son. And God said to Abraham, do not let it be wrong in your eyes concerning the lad and concerning your maidservant. All that Sarah says to you, listen to her voice, because through Isaac seed will be called for you. But as for the son of the maidservant, I will make him into a nation because he is your seed. Next two verses are very key. And Abraham got up early in the morning and took bread and a skin of water and gave them to Hagar, setting them on her shoulder. And so with the boy he sent her away. And she walked and wandered in the desert of Beersheba. When the water from the skin was finished, she dumped the boy under one of the shrubs. She walked, and she sat down by herself across from him as far as a bow shot, because she said, I cannot watch the death of the boy. And she sat down across from him, and she lifted up her voice, and she wept aloud. And God heard the voice of the lad, and an angel of God called to Hagar from the skies and said to her, what is the matter with you, Hagar? Don't be afraid, because God has listened to the voice of the lad over where he is. Stand up, bear up the lad, and hold on to him with your hand, because I will make him into a great nation. Where did they end up?
Sheba.
Beersheba, yes. Here's the map. Gerar, Beersheba. Okay. Is that near Mecca? So I asked them this question. I'm going to show them this map, which is a map of everywhere that Abraham went in Genesis. And I'm going to ask them this question. Can you show me where Mecca is on Abraham's map? Now, if it was actually on the map, it would be about here. Okay? Not even close. This is what we should see. 1,350 kilometers each way. According to one Islamic source we found talking about Abraham's journey down to Mecca, it says it's about a 40-day camel journey each way. I have a question. How far in the Torah, how far did Abraham travel? Abraham. In the Torah, how far did Abraham travel?
Kitchen.
To the kitchen. To the edge of his property, and he sent them away. He didn't travel anywhere. In the Islamic account, how far did Abraham travel? 1,350 kilometers each way. And by the way, he's got to come back again and again and again. But minimum. Because he's going to come back to the time of the first wife, and then the second wife, and then to build the Kaaba. Okay, 4 times in total. Okay, minimally. Okay, probably more. That is ridiculous. Okay, but aside from it being illogical and ridiculous, is that what the Torah says? No. Guess what? I got an atlas. So I used those 2 atlases. The one, the Christian history one, has the biblical maps. Then I found one, an Islamic atlas. And it gives a map. This is the map it has of Abraham. Do you know it's like the other map? It's like an upside down U. Except it adds a whole leg to the journey down to Mecca. Isn't that amazing? So here's the conclusion of this pillar. According to the Torah, did Abraham and Ishmael travel to Mecca? No. According to the Torah, did they build the Kaaba? Who built the Kaaba if not Abraham and Ishmael? Pagans. The reason we know this is because even in the Islamic sources, in the time of Muhammad, he said, Muhammad, amazing. There were 350 idols in the Kaaba in his time, in the 7th century. He took the idols out. He was against idolatry. I'm with you on that, Muhammad. Okay, I'm against the idols. And he restored it to its Abrahamic roots, except it doesn't have Abrahamic roots. So this would be like somebody builds a shrine, like, I don't know if some of you might have, like, in your extended families, maybe you have people who, like from a Buddhist background or Chinese background, or that maybe they venerate their ancestors, or maybe, you know, people who have shrines and they have pictures in them. Imagine somebody who goes to the shrine in their home every day. It has a picture or an idol, like a Hindu shrine for a god, and they become a Christian. And they take the idol or the image out of the shrine. But every day they go back to that shrine and they keep praying toward the shrine. Is that okay? No. That's exactly what the Kaaba is. It was filled with idols. Muhammad took it out. So no more idols in it, but it's still the idol because it wasn't established by God. You see? Yeah, and it has you want to explain it? Yeah.
Also, the Kaaba has the stone,
black stone,
which I believe is an idol originally.
From the pagans, yeah.
From pagans. So it was from pagans, and I'm thinking it's actually the idol for Allah. That's my explanation, because anyway, so it is a pagan shrine from...
We don't normally get into that point here, but just so you understand, I ask these questions. So according to the Torah, did they travel there? Did they build it? Okay, then I'm going to move on to the next one. but we're going to close it now for today. And thank you for bearing with us. Please, next week, bring back your handbook. Do feel free if you want to look up the references and read more into it. The more you spend time learning it yourself, the more you're going to get out of it. And go back over the references, stuff we didn't do maybe. And bring your Bible. If you don't have a Qur'an and you want to get, well, I've got a few, you can take one of them. But if you want to get a Qur'an, here's a really interesting thing you could do. Do you know any Muslims in your life? Your neighbors or your friends or your coworkers? Ask them for a Qur'an. You will establish a new connection with them. Say, just say, I'm a Christian, but I really want to understand what other people believe, and I'm interested to read the Qur'an. I've never read it before. Would you be able to help me find a Qur'an? Okay? They should feel the obligation then to get you one. Okay? And another way to do it, if you're so bold or you want to go with a partner, okay, go to a local mosque and ask them. Same thing. Hey, I'm just interested to learn about Islam and I want to read the Quran, but I don't have one. Do you have a Quran that I could read? And then you could also say, somebody suggested to me the Clear Quran is a good translation. Do you have one? Okay. And they often will have one. Not always, but that's also a great way to connect with them and get their numbers too. Exchange numbers. And those can then be connections we can use to try to connect with them. We'll meet with them later once you've learned more. And I'm happy to meet with them with you as well. If you know any Muslims in your life that you want to reach, know that I will try to make myself available. If you can set up a meeting with that person, yourself, and me, I will sit down and I will go through it with them. And you can watch and learn. Okay? It's a very effective way to help you learn how to train. Like train in it by watching it and seeing how we do it. It's not just the content, but how you deliver it that matters. Okay, so keep that in mind and pray for the people in your life. And thank you guys for your time today, and I'll see you guys next week.